across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, of course. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and whether you are listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you very much indeed for your company. With you all the way until 1 o'clock. And don't forget, if you miss anything from the show, you can go to my YouTube page. We've cunningly called it the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, and you can hit subscribe, and then you never have to miss a thing. Coming up on the show, we're going to be talking about the first migrants, the Channel migrants who arrived yesterday afternoon, have been detained ahead of facing deportation to France in that 1 in, 1 out deal. That's actually 17 in, 1 out. But, you know, let's not quibble over numbers. Does that mean it's going to be a success? And as Mike Graham just pointed out, I mean, they kind of detain everybody initially, don't they, when they get them off those boats and hand, as we discovered from Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary on air yesterday, hand the life jackets back to the French Navy so they can give them to the next bunch of Channel migrants that they escort taxi service-wise across the Channel. But the question is, will these people all actually be detained? Will every single one of them on that boat be detained? Or will most of them just head off to a hotel somewhere and then get that nice little job doing Uber Eats deliveries or Deliveroo deliveries? Who knows? We'll talk about that. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Is your reaction like, well, wow, it's actually started. I didn't believe it would start. Yeah, detaining someone and actually getting them out of the country, quite a different thing, as I think we've learnt over the years, have we not? So give us a call there. I'd love to know your reaction to that news. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Also coming up in this hour, I want to talk about the US President Donald Trump. He could be meeting with Vladimir Putin as early as next week in person, their first meeting since 2018 to discuss a ceasefire in Ukraine. That's according to White House officials. But will we actually see realistically a meeting happening that will actually lead to a ceasefire? And there's a possibility on the Russian president meeting his Ukrainian counterpart Vladimir Zelensky as well. Plus we're going to be talking about the civil servants working at the HMRC tax office who apparently are too busy to take your phone call for a query about your taxes. I mean, they take Google's phone calls, of course. If you're a multinational company or a billionaire, they take your calls because they've got a special hard number to call, a hotline to call. But the tax office staff were too busy on a recent Wednesday to take calls because they were attending a seminar either in person or working from home online on the guilt of being British. Yes, we'll talk about that. Also, we're going to talk about how households in wealthier areas could be hit with huge council tax rises. These are under Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner's plans to divert more funding from deprived regions from those wealthier regions. Plus, we're going to talk about the pavements of London's world-famous Oxford Street. They've been covered with messages just along the curb to pedestrians warning them to mind the grab. It's a little play on mind the gap, those messages you see on the tube. Stop people, for some reason, being incapable of managing to get over a 3-inch gap to get on the tube. I would just call that natural selection myself, but there we are. It's part of a campaign to tackle the surge in thefts of mobile phones in the capital. But aren't we yet again tackling the problem from the wrong end? Like, we should not have our mobile phones out, as opposed to the man on the bike just going past me should not steal it from me. Isn't that the solution? Plus, don't forget, as has been much publicised, and a lot of you apparently online, very, very cross about it. But that's not going to stop me doing the interview. But at 11:30 today, I'm going to be talking in the studio right here to the infamous Bonnie Blue. Bonnie Blue is a controversial porn star, for those who don't know. She shot to fame after her public challenge to have sex with 1,000 complete strange men in just 12 hours. Why am I talking to her? Well, I'm not publicising what she does. She doesn't need my help, I can assure you. She's making plenty of money. But what I want to talk to her about is why so many young women like her, maybe not as extreme as her, but just like her, and who emulate her and who actually admire her, think that, well, selling their bodies for sex to complete strangers is a perfectly ordinary and okay, normal thing to do. Because I don't think it is. Am I just a modern-day Mary Whitehouse? I'll be putting all of that to her later in the show. So if you want to tune in for that, I'd be very grateful for you to actually, Just, hold your judgment until you've heard the conversation. Might be a mad idea, eh? Anyway, this is Talk. We are the home of common sense. We don't shy away from difficult conversations, and neither does my guest joining me in the studio for today, journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, who's back on the show. Very, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Really good to have you back here. First conversation of the day, migrants. Wasn't planning to talk about that first. There were quite a lot of other topics, but just half an hour before we came on air, we learnt that the first migrants who've come over on the Channel dinghies yesterday in the afternoon have been detained with a view to returning them to France in return for getting someone back from France. Now, Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, has already sort of poo-pooed this in interviews. He was on the show briefly yesterday from a boat in the Channel. Not the first politician to do it, but, we always welcome anyone who's publicising the true, face of what is going on. Do you think this is actually going to be these people are going to be detained? Do you think that it's going to be a game changer and it will actually deter people from coming on those boats?
Well, I think the very idea that some migrants being detained when they get to Britain is breaking news probably says everything we need to know about the state of the situation. Look, I don't think it's a step backwards in the sense that apparently this could take 800 people back to France, and what it means is that some people can be...
No. 800 people.
Says.
Well, no. No one actually thinks.
Over a year, I should add.
Well, by the end of this year,
yes.
if it goes ahead, if it's 50 a week. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So that's great, which is not a huge number when more than 25,000 have come so far.
Well, 800 come a week at the moment.
Right. Yeah. So I think the question is it a step back? I don't think it is. Will it be a deterrent? It seems unlikely because they say, well, if you have a link to the UK, you can apply online in France. So I guess that saves us money on migrant hotels and processing fees. So that's some degree of progress. But I don't feel like it will be a deterrent for people to stay in France and do that route when they know that if they come over by boat, there's a roughly 80% chance they'll be given a right to stay here permanently
Well,
anyway.
and the rest. The key thing is, of course, will any of these people who are detained... because everyone's detained initially and then they're processed and provide some ID and then they're sent off to their hostels or their hotels or wherever else. But if they claim to be under 18 to some sort of foster care, even though they've got receding hairline and a beard, but there we are. Teenagers have aged a lot since my day. I'm laughing about it because it is now laughable. But realistically, the moment we saw in the words of the treaty, even though the likes of Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, and other ministers saying no, there won't be all these human rights challenges. We'll be able to send these people back because it's France. We're not sending them back to Afghanistan. There won't be that problem of refoulement. A word we all learnt last year for the first time, let's be honest, where your risk of being sent back from the next country you're sent to would be an issue. That was a big issue, the Rwanda challenges as well. But fundamentally, the moment someone is told you're going to be one of the people we're going to send back to France, the lawyers, it's literally just like all these charities and NGOs get involved, lawyer up, you make your challenge, human rights challenge, Bob's your uncle, you are now bogged down for years and years and years.
Well, if Bob's your uncle, you might have a chance of getting in. That's what the scheme says. But
as long as he lives here.
Yeah, exactly. Lisa Nandy, the Cabinet Minister, has said that there won't be these human rights appeals that take ages because they will be done in France. But it turns out the deal that's been signed says the exact opposite of that. And I think
it's always in the detail.
If the case is that they can go through those processes, then first of all, that means some of them won't be going back to France. They'll be staying here. So it undermines the entire concept. And secondly, it costs a fortune again, which is the situation
we know exactly how when these things go to the tribunals. We've seen exactly what the decision of the judges is. I found it fascinating. Look, you're someone who, let's face it, you're from the sort of woke left. And wishy-washy, liberal, woke left.
Are you trying to make me more unpopular than Bonnie Blue?
Is that possible? I don't know right now. Yeah. Who do you hate on the show most today, guys? Is it Benjamin Butterworth or Bonnie Blue? That's the question for today. Do not write in.
Yeah. I'm Bonnie Beige.
But, you are very liberal, wishy-washy. And even you can now see the insanity of our open borders.
Well, it is insane because, I believe that we should take refugees, and I think we have a proud history of doing that, and there are many that have contributed enormously.
Yeah.
But I think there's a deep dishonesty to the politics around this situation, which is that there are two things. I think Keir Starmer would do better for his own base, let alone anyone else, to make the case for taking some refugees. I think most people would actually accept the moral case. But the second...
I think people do. People were very welcoming of Ukrainians, who were welcoming of the Hong Kong Chinese coming over, with British passports.
And the Afghanis that served with our own troops.
Yeah, people are very welcoming and open about it, but they just simply don't believe, quite rightly, that the average young man who's thrown away his documentation on a dinghy on the way over from Calais is anything other than an economic migrant or an illegal worker. bugger.
But I think politicians have to be honest that the ability to be a refugee, the ability to move, has never been more accessible.
Yep.
And the scale on which it's happening is something that is creating huge problems, not just here in France, in Germany, in Spain, in
accepting
Greece.
a few thousand or even a few tens of thousands of people in exceptional circumstances from one country. Look, taking Jewish emigres and Jewish refugees, at the Second World War. But this is completely. We're on a different scale here. We're talking about, let's be honest, billions of people who want to leave their basket case, economically mired, war-torn, civil war-torn countries to come to Europe. Sorry, we're full. Also, why can't those people stay at home? And our country didn't just miraculously happen out of the blue. People fought and died and battled for centuries to get the rights that we have and the quality of life that we have in the West and across the West. It didn't just happen. It wasn't given to us here in Britain. So why don't people stay? Why don't they, if we're going to get the brightest, the best, why don't you stay and improve your own country and fight for the people that, of your country? That's what I think is really strange.
There is an example. Denmark has had a much calmer strategy on this, and it's had a left-wing social democratic government for most of the time.
Yep.
But when Syria started to recover and find its feet again, it said to all the Syrians that had arrived there, off you go, you're going back. Quite easily. And, that isn't a country with a far-right government. It's been run by their equivalent of the Labour Party most of the time. So there is a precedent for doing this. And I also think you say that people fought and died. They fought fascism. And I'm afraid some of these countries, the version of Islam they have is inherently fascist. It's incredibly controlling, authoritarian, not a cultural match. And I think that there is a danger in some of those people.
Yeah, well, absolutely, particularly people they want to take from lots of Labour Party people want to take people from Gaza. Not a single person. Genuinely, no. Full stop, no. Let's talk about Ukraine, though. Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, met with Vladimir Putin yesterday. There's now, after a phone call Vladimir Putin had with European leaders, including Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, he said there's going to be a meeting as early as next week with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, face-to-face, their first face-to-face meeting since 2018. And then this could be conditional on him agreeing also to have a meeting in person with Volodymyr Zelensky. Do you have any hopes that Vladimir Putin would be serious about coming to the table on a ceasefire before his military aims are reached, or do you think that the economic pressure, sanctions on India as secondary tariffs and things for dealing with Vladimir Putin on oil and gas, do you think that will help bring him to the table?
Well, Volodymyr Zelensky has said that he thinks a ceasefire is now more likely, and so that. It was
a 0% before.
Yes, that's true. So I suppose that's a modicum of hope. I think the truth is, Donald Trump came in saying, "I'm going to fix this war in 100 days," which clearly didn't happen. In fact, the number of Russian attacks on Ukraine has doubled this year compared with last. And so I think if you look at Putin's actions rather than his words, it says that he's got no intention of backing down and that he's not been intimidated by Trump. Now, he is obviously Trump is trying to put these sanctions on India for using Russian oil, and he's trying to hit them where it hurts. The Russian economy has done better than many expected, but it is still fairly weak. And so I think the best hope of getting Putin round the table probably is to starve him of the funds that he needs.
Yeah, well, again, the reality is, though, he's got, billions and billions, and hundreds of billions, gold bullion sort of ready, salvaged away, knowing that this day would come. Let's also talk about the possibility of more tax rises. Keir Starmer yesterday, interesting, with that £51 billion black hole. Well done, Rachel Reeves. Talked about that on the show a lot yesterday. He was asked, as always, does he repeat his pledges about not putting tax up on working people? It's about the fact we already had that jobs tax on the national insurers, employers' side of it. He kind of wouldn't repeat those pledges again. That's not putting income tax rates, VAT rates or national insurance rates up for people. We've already have a half breaking of that national insurance pledge. We've got tax thresholds being frozen, which means that actually tax does go up for people. They move into a different tax bracket, but you haven't put the tax rate up. The whole in the public finances we're looking at, identified yesterday by a think tank, is such that actually you're looking at the equivalent of 5 pence on income tax. That is a huge tax rise on basic rate for ordinary people. But that would just be politically untenable. I mean, that is just, you're automatically out of office next time round, as if they weren't already. But there's now lots of talk about how else they can get that money. And one of the things they've been looking at is council tax hikes. Now, Angela Rayner wants to have some funding reforms, and basically millions of households who are in wealthier areas, not necessarily those who are wealthy themselves, will end up having to basically subsidise poorer areas. Is that fair?
Well, I actually think the idea in principle is fair, because Rishi Sunak had said about how he changed the formula so that less money was going to cities, which tend to have higher rates of poverty, and going to the home counties, which I thought was a kind of obscene way to behave. And he seemed to boast about it.
Labour want to help Labour areas, and Tories wanted to help Tory areas.
But I do think this is the kind of thing that you would expect a Labour government to do. Areas like Westminster and Kensington and Chelsea have the lowest council tax rates in the whole country. Now, Kensington and Chelsea in particular is extremely wealthy.
But don't they have because they have very efficient services?
Well, and quite limited services often. But
maybe that's what people want.
But I do think there is an argument for this, to say that there are areas of this country that have been terribly let down. Their infrastructure, their town centres, so much about those places they called it levelling up, is falling apart. And so I think asking some of the wealthiest areas to pay a bit more to cover that is fair. The problem is, what this report talks about is that it would be London and the south. Now, London in particular might have very high house prices, but there are many people in those homes, especially people that rent, who are not earning a lot of money, have next to nothing left. And so the house...
After their huge rents.
Right.
Or indeed after their huge mortgages.
The house price, which dictates the council tax band, is not a reflection of their wealth in the way that maybe it is in some other parts of the country. And so there's a danger that, because they talked about Camden Council could be affected by
My
this.
local council, hello.
Now, Camden has many rich people, it also has many very poor people. And so the idea that you can simply take from one council as an entity
my street has some very, very expensive properties, and it also has council flats. I mean, as a lot of cities do have it. But this is the thing. At the end of the day, tax is going to go up. It's a question of whose tax is going to go up, and everyone's going to be basically rallying for everyone else's but mine. But actually, the reality is the black hole is so big, it's going to be everyone's. And also, when we have borrowing, it's going sky high, £110 billion a year going out on borrowing, and that's not even just paying off the debt that we've accrued over the last 20, 30 years. That is paying the interest on the debt. This is literally like having a huge mortgage and never paying it off. Ever paying it off and thinking, well, that's okay. No, it really isn't. It really isn't. You can't pay an interest-only mortgage forever.
And I think about £10 billion of this is increase in interest payments, and 22 billion of it is, a familiar figure, is economic growth not being as high as expected. So the only way to actually fix this gap is to have growth.
And,
but that's what we still don't have.
If you continue to spend a fortune on welfare and have people not working, and if you continue to spend, rake in more and more taxes, particularly taxes on jobs, ta-da! You're going to see you're not going to have growth. It is mind-blowing. Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister, former Chancellor, his solution today apparently is a gambling tax raid. And they use that to fund benefits reform, which would end the cap on two-child benefit. I mean, brilliant. Let's just encourage more people who don't work. And by the way, he keeps saying most of these people work, they don't. One person works 2 days a week, is not working. If you've got 3 or more kids, you both need to be working full-time to pay for that. Or Dad needs to get a better job. I'm old-fashioned on these things, but this is not the reform that the British people are crying out for. Just one final topic I want to get to before we get to the lots of calls which are already coming in on this, and that is... this is so frustrating. HMRC, if you've ever tried to call the tax man, I mean, good luck with ever trying that. I say, unless you're a billionaire or unless you work for a multinational company, they get a hotline, guys. They get their own dedicated tax man or woman. Not us normal mortals. Literally hundreds of thousands of calls are not answered. People just give up after 3 hours of waiting. And if you ever wonder why they don't answer your call and don't get your work done and don't reply to it, I've never had a reply to anything when I've written or emailed HMRC. It's because civil servants are busy going on courses. They're doing their DEI and goodness knows what. Well, staff at HM Revenue and Customs were able to log in remotely on Wednesday or attend a session actually in person. I know, amazing, sometimes going in the office. And this was a session, a seminar on, I kid you not, the guilt of being British. This is what people paid for by you and me as public servants to serve you and me in the public. This is what they were doing on a Wednesday afternoon, learning about why they should be, by the guilt of being British. Do you feel any guilt about being British? Because I'm prouder of lots of things in my world and my life, but being British is absolutely on that list.
Well, I think Jacob Rees-Mogg actually hit the nail on the head, where he said it's odd that so many people that hate the country would want to run it. Which is what working in a government department is. It kind of blew my mind that they literally called it the guilt of being British.
Yeah, you think they'd hide it a bit,
right? That isn't
you?
the tabloid headline. That's actually what the session was.
It was a listening circle.
Exactly, but not listening.
I mean, it literally wants to. It makes me want to shoot myself in the head. Thinking if someone made me attend that, I would rather shoot myself in the head. I really would.
I think it tells you quite a lot, because obviously there will have been layers of managers that this would have gone through for the funding and the time allocation of staff in order to be approved, and clearly they thought it was okay. I don't understand why you would need any discussions of this nature, regardless of what they think, because it's not to do with the job of working at HMRC. It's not a
It's got nothing. This has got nothing to do with. Well, it was billed as a powerful, interactive, and reflective listening circle, exploring the emotional complexity of being South Asian and British, covering topics including the emotional weight of colonial history as part of the taxman's commitment to diversity, equality, and inclusion.
Well, they can be emotionally complex at 6:01 when they've finished taking the calls, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
It is absurd.
I think you'll find it's 4:59 when they stop taking your calls.
But it's this thing of sort of running everything a bit like a students' union. You know, this is what you expect in a society like that, not in a government department, not in a business.
You see, even he's woke and liberal and wishy-washy, and even he thinks this is madness. Seriously, guys, you know, the tide has turned. 10:23 is the time. Just some breaking news. 2 women and a man have been charged with showing support for a prescribed terrorist group, Palestine Action, following a protest in central London on July the 5th. The Met Police have said, I'm surprised it's just 3, because of an awful lot of people showing support for the prescribed terrorist group, Palestine Action. An awful lot of people around the world, including many academics and others, apparently think it's absolutely fine for people to support a prescribed terrorist group. There's a reason why you can actually support people of Palestine, you can support children in Gaza, etc., without actually having to support a prescribed terrorist group. I think it'd be quite simple to do that if you chose to do that. But if you don't, then apparently you will actually be facing criminal charges, allegedly. Anyway, great to hear that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call on any of the topics we're talking about. I know some of you want to have a go at me about interviewing Bonnie Blue. I know. Tia Billinger is actually her real name. We should call her by that, her real name. I don't normally interview people named by the characters they play on air. But also, obviously, this one in, one out policy, it came into force yesterday, and the first migrants were detained. Does that mean it's all going to work? Or do you have as little faith as I do? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk.
Fitting rooms, unisex fitting rooms. The staff members are very uncomfortable with this. It is wrong that the executives can sit in an ivory tower and say, well, let's be inclusive, let's allow men to carry out these functions, but the people that are actually dealing with the front line of it are not getting any help and support or proper guidance. They're really, on the whole, they're uncomfortable. I dare say there's few women in the land that would be happy with a man fitting them for a bra.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk, the home of common sense. 10:27 is the time. Let's get to your messages coming in about those very first Channel migrants being detained yesterday under Britain's and France's one-in, one-out return deal. Does that mean they'll actually, any of them, be returned? Really? And anyway, it's not one in, one out. It's 17 in, one out as well, we know. Jennifer says, emptiest gesture ever. The damage has already been done. Samuel says, detained. Yeah, right. They'll be back over soon enough once they've been deported to France. I mean, big assumption, Samuel, they're getting deported. Charlie says, pathetic. It should be none in, all out. Simple as that. Daniel says, 50 per week out is not one in, one out when hundreds come each week. Just being lied to at this rate. And Nigel says, by definition, it could be Nigel Farish's one. By definition, all of the people crossing have been detained. They have to be processed before going to a hotel. Exactly. So is the government using detained in this sense, or trying to imply that some individuals are under lock and key somewhere on some unknown basis? And Kyle says, I don't get it. By definition, the numbers will stay the same. And as for it being a deterrent, there's nothing more than wishful thinking there. Well, let's go to Jason, who's on the line in Wiltshire, wants to have his say on 0344 499 1000. Good morning to you, Jason. What do you want to say about this?
Morning, Julia. Thanks for taking the call. First of all, I just want to sort of say my condolences to James passing. I'm going to miss it when he has his little outrages in his rant.
Yeah, exactly.
And he actually made you sound quite tame. So
didn't he just? We went hammer and tongs a few times off air, I have to say, James Bell and myself. But yeah, no, he is very much missed. We really appreciate it. Everyone has been so kind. The messages had online and on air, and I passed that on to his widow Nadine, saying, you know, every caller we've had has said that. So yeah, thank you. We understand that. We appreciate that. Jason, what do you want to say about the one in, one out policy?
Well, the sort of 5,600 in sort of the one it goes back out then comes back in again. It's never going to happen, is it? This is the left-wing human rights lawyer that done everything he could to stop the Rwanda programme with the Tories. When in Rwanda they were going to go somewhere it was safe, good accommodation. Here, is he really going to send them back to France to sit in a field?
I think they're going to send some of them back, but at the end of the day, they don't get anything in France. They're going to be back in the tents at Calais, and then what do you think they're going to try and do?
Again. They'll be back here again, then we've got to send them back again. But I want to know also what this extra 100 million was he's pledged. Was it last week?
Yeah, it was for border security here, I understand.
Yeah, well, what can we do, though? Because we can't stop them. We can't turn them around. We can't do...
I know, but we can buy some nicey new high-vis jackets.
Well, that's true, yeah.
I mean, you know, don't be so negative, Jason.
I did hear Fortnum and Masons do good afternoon tea, so if they would like to...
Please don't give them ideas. It's the sort of thing they'll end up doing, my love. It really is. Jason, I completely feel your frustration. I don't think anyone believes any of this stuff. I mean, it's embarrassing, but you know, we'll keep talking about it, exposing the madness. Jason, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Let's go to Steve, who is in Blackpool, and Steve wants to have his say on my interview coming up in an hour's time with Bonnie Blue, whose real name, of course, is Tia Billinger. What do you want to say?
Good morning, Julia. I'm going to stick up for her. I say she's found a niche in the market. I don't know why nobody else has thought of this in the past. She does a service, she has a business. I only found out about it yesterday because you mentioned her on your radio saying she's going to be on. I was like, who the heck is Bonnie Blue? Okay,
Steve, there are lots of people going, sure. And then
the next thing I know, it's a Channel 4 documentary. So I watched that on the way to work this morning. I've watched half. I've not seen the end yet. She seems like a very intelligent business lady.
She does.
Business is her.
Yeah, she does. She's making, by all accounts, millions from this, living the life of Riley.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you think it's absolutely fine?
I don't...
Do you have a daughter?
I don't have a daughter now.
If you had a daughter, would you be saying that if it was about...
If she came to me and said, Dad, I'm going to make a lot of money doing this, I'd have to back her.
Why?
Because that's what a father does.
Well, a father... No, because anything... If it's money, then it's worth it.
She's got a lavish lifestyle. She's getting everything she wanted in life, and she's using the oldest trick in the book. And people are paying the money. Fair play to her.
I mean, they are. Yeah, I mean, lots of people make money from it. Again, I think it's really interesting that people say, well, once there's a certain... Indeed, her own mother in the documentary says, I defy anybody if you could make £1 million a month that you wouldn't do this. But I think actually there's an awful lot of people for £1 million a month wouldn't do it.
there quite possibly is, and I bet it doesn't. You know, I don't know why men aren't doing the same thing. I mean,
because there aren't enough women queuing up to pay them for that.
Quite possibly.
Well, that very possibly. I mean, very possibly. The vast majority of people making money in porn are women, because men are largely the customers, unless some gay porn as well. But look, we'll talk about it with her. I'm sure, by the sounds of it, you will tune in. I hope you weren't watching that on the public transport, that Channel 4 documentary, because I would have been very unhappy if I was sitting next to you. But there we are. Steve, thank you for that. Appreciate your call. Well, he defends her. I mean, I'm not going to be having a go at her. I want to interview her, find out her thoughts. So do stay tuned for that in an hour's time. We're going to take a very, very quick break right now. Up next, we'll be talking to the brilliant Brendan O'Neill about all the big stories in the news. And is he as convinced as we are, of course, that those migrants are all going back? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:35 is the time. Brendan O'Neill joins us now. He's chief political writer at Spiked Online. He's also author of the brilliant book, a number of brilliant books, After the Pogrom, 7th of October, Israel and the Crisis of Civilization. A very good morning to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia. How are you doing?
Lots I want to get through with you, but I must ask you about that breaking news in the last couple of hours that the first migrants who've arrived on their dinghies from Calais yesterday have been detained, detained with a view to this one-in, one-out deportation deal. How confident are you that any of them will actually end up heading back over the channel?
Not confident at all, really. And even if some do, it won't be that many. We know that. Everyone knows that. And, you know, the thing is, does this government expect some brownie points because it's done the bare minimum of detaining people who come here illegally? That's what countries are supposed to do. If you break through someone's borders without permission, illegally, breaking the law the minute you step into this country, you ought to be detained. That should have been what was happening for years. But of course, as we know, these people were brought in, they were put up in 4-star hotels, they were given bed and board. So the government is now doing the bare minimum by detaining some migrants. Yvette Cooper says some of them will be sent home within weeks. And you just know it's going to be a slow process. There's going to be human rights challenges. Not all of them will go back. Everyone knows that from the very beginning, and it's a really tragic situation.
I mean, again, the reaction from our audience over the last few weeks, ever since it's been announced, is just sort of people just rolling their eyes to all intents and purposes. Just no one believes any of this. And again, it is fascinating. And as one of our callers so far today, Jason, said, you know, that this is the Prime Minister, human rights lawyer who stopped the Rwanda deal. Donald Trump's going to be using that accommodation that we paid for in Rwanda to house some of his own deported migrants, but we won't. I think Germany was looking at it as well. I mean, you know, it's actually painful, isn't it? But the reality is also, whoever is going to be chosen to come here, I mean, we're told that the French won't actually exchange any information, personal information about those migrants with the British. We're going to have to try and assess these people and bring them over. But they're all, again, we're told it's one in, one out. But the reality is that one we send back, if they do ever go back, is going to be able to just try again and just turn up again. And the one who does come here apparently as a legitimate asylum seeker is going to be able to bring their entire extended family, because that's what's always been allowed. And we still have the other 750 a week coming, even if all 50 do get detained a week. We're going to end up with more people in the end than we've got right now.
It's a crisis situation. It's an emergency situation. I couldn't believe it last week or the week before when the cabinet had a crisis emergency meeting about the war in Gaza. Now, of course, the war in Gaza is a crisis, but they should be discussing what's happening here. And the crisis at the moment is the crisis at our borders. We live under a government, under a regime that seems uninterested in the idea of sovereignty, uninterested in the idea of protecting our own borders. And that's the starting point of a democracy. That's the starting point of a sovereign nation. That you know who and what is crossing your borders. Just as you and I can't just go into Italy or some other country unless we've got our passport, unless we've got some form of permission.
Stood in a long queue while the EU people walk through quickly,
That's right. And if they want to throw us out for whatever reason because we break a law or we say something that they don't like, then that is their prerogative as an independent nation. We seem to have lost sight of that ourselves, and we're no longer doing it.
Now, we haven't lost sight of it. Our great leaders and our civil servants have lost sight of it, but nobody, because I agree with you, I don't think they do understand the notion of a nation state of borders. They only recognised it when it was Ukraine. They recognise it when it's Palestine. They don't understand the concept of national sovereignty, autonomy, accountability here in this country. I mean, well, this is a Labour Party who thinks that the EU citizens should have been allowed to vote in the Brexit referendum, for goodness sake. But this makes a lot of sense when you find out this story. And it's an absurd story, but I think it epitomises everything that's wrong, that's going on at the heart of our government. And this is a bunch of civil servants working at the HM Revenue and Customs, so the taxman's office, basically holding a seminar on what's literally called, not even hiding it away, the guilt of being British. So on Wednesday, you could log in remotely, because of course they're all working from home, and this was during office hours, or you could actually attend in person. And this was an hour-long listening circle, whatever the hell that is, held from 11 a.m. until midday. And basically it was billed as I'm going to read this to you because I'm going to try not to laugh out loud. A powerful, interactive and reflective listening circle exploring the emotional complexity of being South Asian and British, covering topics including the emotional weight of colonial history as part of the taxman's commitment to diversity, equality, inclusion. I mean, the emotional complexity of being South Asian and British. Rishi Sunak was Chancellor. I think he didn't find it emotionally complex.
It's preposterous. And it's more than preposterous. It's actually quite gross to think that this culture of self-loathing, this kind of fashionable self-hatred now infests pretty much every institution, right through to the HMRC. You know, this institution has one job and one job only, which is to collect tax. That's it, full stop. And also answer people's phone calls. That would be nice. Who are
trying to pay tax. Who are trying to pay the correct amount of tax.
Yeah, that's right. If they weren't so busy doing these self-loathing courses online, on Zoom, then they might be able to actually get their jobs done and talk to ordinary, hardworking Brits. It's really gross, actually, and it demonstrates that we are run by a layer of society that actually hates the country that they govern and feels ashamed of the country that they govern.
Well, the country that they're supposed to serve. The public they are supposed to serve. They despise and have contempt for us because we are not embarrassed and ashamed by our country's values, flag, history, or anything.
That's right. And it goes through all institutions. We know the civil service is just rife with this stuff. We know that the political class has that kind of fashionable disdain for British history. We know that Sadiq Khan wanted to take down certain statues or rename certain roads in London because they were named after dodgy people. We know the university system is overrun with this nonsense. This is we have a ruling class that hates the country that it rules over, and that is where all these problems start, right down to their inability to fix our communities, their inability to control the borders, their inability to give us a good life. Why would they, when they don't even like the country they're in charge of?
Well, indeed, and again, why would you want to control the borders? Because you don't want to protect British culture and British values in any way, because you have nothing but contempt for those things. It's funny that so many people from other parts of the world and other cultures want to come to our country. I wonder why they don't have contempt for our culture in the same way. Let's also talk about, I mean, again, small point, we're going to have a load of taxes going up in the autumn. Did anyone think anything different? But you'd think tax staff might be working on issues like that, which are going to affect real people. But let's also talk about an issue. I know it's very close to your heart, and you've written a book on this. And you've travelled to Israel many, many times, and you've interviewed so many people and talked about what happened on October the 7th and the aftermath. aftermath, and you've been a stalwart in defending the right of Israel to do what is necessary to defend itself. What do you make of with the Guardian headline, leading global scholars, I mean the usual wokerati in academia, signing a letter urging the UK to end the ban on Palestine Action, which has been prescribed as a terrorist group? This, by the way, after today we've had another 3 people who've been charged with support for the prescribed terrorist group after a demonstration at the weekend. More demonstrations planned, and the Prime Minister apparently telling colleagues that we've had some cases of what Palestine Action has done which have been publicised, but actually their targeting of Jewish-owned businesses, particularly in the capital, there's a lot more that they've been doing that hasn't been publicised. What do you make of these academics thinking that this prescribed terrorist group is an organisation we should be allowed to cheer on?
You know, who the hell do they think they are, poking their noses into British affairs, an affair that has been pretty much settled by Parliament? This action has been taken in the democratic fashion, and I don't think it's any of their business, these global influencers.
I hadn't heard of most of them, to be fair.
And we don't even, you couldn't pick them out in a lineup, and they think they should have the right to tell us what should happen in this country. My view is that Palestine Action is a very sinister organisation. And what this organisation consists of, in the most part, are time-rich, largely quite plummy leftists and privately educated Stalinists who hate Israel with a real strange passion and bigotry that I think can only be described in terms of racism rather than politics. That's how I view it. And if you look at the action they took in Stamford Hill, which is a heavily Jewish part of London, where they did smash up a Jewish-owned business, they did throw paint on it. It hit some religious symbols, in fact, their paint. And they said the business had links with Israeli firms, but the business denies it. I'm old enough to remember when it was fascists who used to smash up Jewish businesses, when it was Nazis who used to reduce Jewish shops to broken glass. Now we have Palestine Action doing it supposedly in the name of anti-imperialism or anti-war. I'm not buying it. It's a gross organisation, and I don't want to hear from these global influencers about what we should do to it.
Hear to that. Brendan O'Neill, always good to get your thoughts. Appreciate that. Chief political writer at Spiked Online. Thank you for joining us. Benjamin Butterworth still with us. What do you make of this, the Palestine Action? I hadn't heard of them until the discussion came up about them being prescribed. Yet another organisation that claims they're all about the Palestinian people, claims they're all about, saving children in Gaza, but actually seem to just hate Israel and, let's be honest, hate Jews.
Yeah, and they hate Israel regardless of what happens in Gaza. That's just the excuse they're using.
They hated Israel before the IDF was going into Gaza.
Precisely. But the question about whether it should be prescribed, I think, is a slightly different one, because clearly it's causing real problems. If you have hundreds of people turning up on marches explicitly saying they support this group,
and you arrest every single one of them.
Well, you have to, but I mean, in reality, that's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to find the prison places if they're repeat offenders and deserve that. And it starts to become quite a problem for the police to maintain this law. And then
build more prisons. Well, I'm not sure you should necessarily go to prison for going on a march supporting someone. I'm not entirely sure that would be as far as I would go.
But the other point I'd make about prescription is that usually it's something we use for international terrorist organisations like the Taliban or ISIS. And so you prescribe them because that means you cut them off from the funding and the infrastructure in order to carry out the activities. You can't replicate ISIS as one bloke in your bedroom, right? And so doing this for a domestic organisation, well, there's nothing to stop the same group of people with the same goals setting up a new group with a new name and behaving the same way.
And they do that. Yes, and then they should be prescribed as well.
Indeed,
but you can't.
But
it's the idea that you can't.
Farcical.
Yes, it does. Yeah, but again, the People's Front of Judea, kind of Judean People's Front kind of territory. But at the end of the day, you can't have organisations that are going around committing criminal acts of terror against certainly particular members of an ethnic or religious minority in this country, and justifying it, and people openly supporting it on the streets, and everyone saying that's fine. What should you do other than say you can't go around supporting an organisation that does that?
I mean, I agree that their behaviour is monstrous, and I think Brendan O'Neill put it perfectly, saying it's understood better in racism than in politics. I think that's a very good assessment. The point I'm making is that it causes quite practical challenges, and if the police can't manage the scale of it, then it starts to undermine the legitimacy not of that law but of other prescribed groups.
Well, exactly. Yeah, but again, the police can't even manage to police the supposedly pro-Palestine marches, which I think have become hate marches. They're organised by groups with close links with Hamas and other terrorist organisations, and anyone who's still on those marches, I'm sorry, you know. Sorry, I don't think you care one whit about a child who may or may not be suffering from hunger in Gaza right now. I think you just hate Jewish people, and I'm as simple as that. And I just think we need to call it what it is. I really do. 10:47 is time. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call 0344 499 1000. Up next, going to talk about going shopping in the world-famous Oxford Street and facing a sign telling you basically to hide your mobile phone or it might get stolen from you. But why do we have to hide away everything we own now from the thieves? Why don't the police just, I don't know, stop the thieves from stealing from us? We'll talk to former Commander of Special Operations at New Scotland Yard, Roy Rum, about that. Up next, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:50 is the time. Benjamin Butterworth is still with me as well. Benjamin, have you been shopping in Oxford Street at all lately?
I have.
And have you seen these mind the grab signs?
I haven't been there in the last 24 hours, but I tell you what, I am always clutching onto my phone on Oxford
when you're
Street.
there. Well, I feel that pretty much everywhere I go these days. So, but just so people know, if you go on London's Tube, you'll probably have seen these very famous signs, all yellow signs, well written paintwork all over everywhere in the Tube in London, saying mind the gap, because you've got sort of trains which got straight carriages, you've got bendy, curvy train station lines, and apparently a lot of people can't make it over a 2-inch gap. Again, for me, it's a Darwin thing, it's natural selection. If you struggle with a gap, so be it. But there we are. However, in imitation of that, sponsored by Currys, I think, the electoral retailer, they've now got these big purple and white signs. If you're watching on social media, on YouTube, you can see saying "Mind the grab," and someone holding their phone and another hand reaching out for it. And the message is basically to shoppers on Oxford Street: step back from the curb. This is a phone snatching hotspot. But is it the answer to tell people to hide their phone, not hold their phone out? You know, if you've got a smart watch, hide your watch or don't wear it out. Keep your bag close to you. Or should we stop people doing that in the first place? And I don't know, maybe arrest a few people who do it, charge them and put them behind bars. Well, let's talk about this with Roy Ram. He's a former commander of Specialist Operations at New Scotland Yard. Very good morning to you, Roy.
Morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. It seems to me whatever the problem is when it comes to crime, the answer is always, well, it's your fault. You shouldn't have had your phone out. You shouldn't have been wearing your Rolex watch if you've got one. You shouldn't have been you're carrying your bag or the like. You're the one in the wrong, and actually it's your responsibility. But that's the wrong way round, isn't it?
Yes, it's a short answer. You'll get no argument from me on that, Julia. I think it's a sad disgrace that one of the world's premier shopping streets is identified as a phone snatch hotspot.
Yeah.
And the answer is putting these hideous stickers along the footway. What should be happening is we should have night courts ready to prosecute and imprison people for any theft from the person for 6 months if you plead guilty, and if you're convicted after trial, a minimum of 2 years. We've got to start policing and sentencing aggressively.
Yeah, and also they'll say, I know what the police will say because they've said it to me in my local area, they say it on air, we've just got too many crimes of conduct. But each phone isn't stolen by an individual phone snatcher on a bike, on an electric bike. They're organised gangs. These lads are going out and they know exactly what they're doing. They're snatching 50 a day. And we know that the West End is a hotspot area. Now, the police say, well, we have tackled this. The snatches are down 20%. But everyone I know, I found it in my local area, just near where I live, but seeing it in the West End, people are now so wary. People are foreign tourists will say, oh, I've been told, you can't wear your nice watch out anywhere in London because, you're going to have that snatched off you. Around where I live, there were loads of mums who were being mugged for their watches and their posh handbags on the school run. Broad daylight. And each time the answer from the Met Police, and indeed police in many other cities as well, is, well, you shouldn't have these things on display. But why shouldn't someone have their mobile phone out when they're talking to someone or taking a phone? Why shouldn't someone, if they've worked hard or they've been given it as a gift, have a nice watch on and have it showing in public? Why shouldn't people be able to do that?
But they should. There's no argument that. It's a bit like going back to this argument about sexual assaults on women. We stopped saying, well, girls shouldn't wear short skirts because. Or revealing tops because that invites a sexual assault. Yeah. We're past that. We now acknowledge that people should be able to wear, the clothes that they would like to wear and feel safe. And the same with people. And in our capital city, the idea that we have got to sneak into a corner somewhere and hold our phone carefully to our face to avoid and not go near the curb, or not, as you say, wear decent jewellery for fear of being mugged in the street is the wrong way round. Yeah. We have to be more aggressive. I do absolutely have huge sympathy with them, Matt, because the number of hours of police time they are wasting on policing demonstrations in London is eating into their capacity to deal with the things that really matter to others, like feeling safe on the streets.
Well, exactly. Again, not feeling safe, being safe on the streets. And we're constantly told, no, crime's going down. But everyone I know talks about how they are aware of crime going up. My local area, we lived in the same place for 19 years. In the last year, we've had 2 attempted break-ins. I've lived in the same place for 19 years. I've travelled the world. I've backpacked in some of the poorest countries in the world. Never had a bag stolen. Had my bag stolen in broad daylight on a Saturday afternoon outside my local supermarket. Everyone I know, Mike Graham, my colleague here, had his phone stolen in broad daylight. A copper came by. He said his own phone had been stolen when he was in uniform, for goodness sake. It's off the scale and it's become normalised. And this to me feels like New York back in sort of 1990, before they sort of really took on the zero tolerance policy. What we really need is police to absolutely get on the case and flood things. But the reality is that the police say, well, every time I arrest somebody, that takes me off the streets for 12 hours. Now, that's insane for a start.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think this is a much bigger problem than just a police problem. This is a criminal justice problem. And justice needs to be swift and it needs to hurt. Yeah. got to stop worrying so much about the person that's arrested, the accused, and worry about the victims of crime. And we've just heard that the Met's got to close, I think, 8 police stations across London. What's the signal that gives to Londoners about feeling safe?
Everything has to be basically online now. I mean, again, I had a bag theft June last year. I've not spoken to a single person in reality. I've not spoken to anyone on the. No, I've had a couple of phone calls, but both of those were to tell me that the suspect accused of stealing my bag hasn't turned up to court again. I know. I mean, you've got to laugh, haven't you?
It's pretty dispiriting, though, Julia, and back in the day, I actually worked at Marylebone Police Station as a detective officer, and we ran teams against pickpockets there that were very effective, and we seemed to get them into court so much quicker then, and they were sentenced, and where they were foreigners, they were retained in custody and deported immediately.
I mean, Roy, you're just talking in complete nonsense terms now. This is pie in the sky madness. We'll never do anything that sensible ever again. Roy Ram, so appreciate you joining us. Again, former commander, sadly, at New Scotland Yard. I wish he was the current commander. Benjamin Busworth, I mean, look, I know you talked on air and you've written a lot about, you've been mugged a number of times.
I was mugged on the South Bank, and they strangled me and threatened me with a knife and took my phone. And it was, I mean, they were wearing balaclavas, but they sounded like teenagers, which was depressing that, they were so young. Do you know what? The only reason they actually did follow them up, but the only reason they did it was because I sat on Channel 5 and talked about it, and then the journalist Dan Wootton made a big fuss online, and then suddenly they took attention. Oh no, the only reason my bag thief suspect has been charged is because I've made such a stink about it with the local police. I'll tell you what, my flatmate had his bag stolen in the exact same spot about a month later. He's not famous, he's not on television or anything, and they didn't do anything. No. And he worked for the Foreign Secretary at the time, and it had sensitive materials in that bag. Automatically, and they still didn't care. I mean, this is the thing. Again, I know so many people. They've actually, watched people load their bike, like 3 men load their bike, cut it, lovely, straight in a van. They videoed it because they're not tackling 3 men on their own, and they videoed it. They've got the license plate, or they've had a phone stolen, and they know. Literally, I can trace it. It's in this house here. Here's a photo of the man who stole it. Etc. I've seen them coming out of the house. Police do absolutely nothing. I don't know what the hell the police are doing. I don't think there are that many pro-Palestine action marches. I mean, they are so busy. What are they doing? Because I don't know anyone who's had a police officer actually investigate their crime. It's an attitude thing. They call it so-called low-level crime. But it's not low-level. This sets the tone. You've got like a £1,000 mobile phone. That's not low-level crime. Exactly, someone's saved up for that. And it sets the tone for society. I remember when I was at... Karen, very briefly. It sets the tone. You have to get rid of the small things to fix the big things. Zero tolerance. And also, again, you think that those guys who are stealing the mobile phones, do you think they're not committing other crimes as well? That's the madness, isn't it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, particularly if you've been a victim of crime. Get in touch. 0344 499 1000. I know lots of police officers don't have to give you a real name. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I bet you're as annoyed about this policy as the rest of us. Don't forget, in the next half hour, we're going to be talking to Bonnie Blue. You could be angry about it, but I'd rather you listen before you got angry. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's just approaching 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is absolutely fabulous to have your company. Don't forget, if you miss anything on the show, you missed anything on the show previously, you can go to our YouTube page at talkTV. But you can also crucially go to my own YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Really easy to find. You've got no excuses not for finding it. If you hit subscribe, you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, I'm going to talk more about those first migrants arriving on channel boats yesterday, probably the ones who were watched by Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary. He was live on the show from the channel yesterday after just watching the boats, the French Navy escorting a bunch of people in their dinghies to the British Navy, who then took them and then rather outraged, I thought, asked for the life jackets back so they can use them for the next lot. Quite extraordinary, that. But we should hand them back with the migrants in them, should we not? But those first migrants have been detained, and apparently those are going to be some of those who will be returned to the French, in return for which we will take someone who's a legitimate asylum seeker from France. Do you believe those people will ever actually leave this country? Won't they just start the human rights challenges, which, despite what a lot of government ministers have said in the last few weeks about this, and certainly this week, actually still just as many new legal challenges are allowed under human rights legislation, that they will just simply never actually be sent home. Love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs $1, standard network rate message, and we'll get to your calls in the next 20 minutes or so. Also going to be talking about Donald Trump. He says he's going to be meeting with Vladimir Putin as early as next week, and possibly the two men might meet with Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine as well to discuss a ceasefire in Ukraine. How hopeful are we of that? Plus, we're going to talk more about those civil servants working at the tax office at HMRC who spent an hour attending a seminar on the guilt of being British during working hours, while hundreds of thousands of calls from taxpayers go unanswered every single month. Plus, we're going to be talking about why council tax may well be going up to pay for some of that black hole that Rachel Reeves has found, but also to basically help poorer areas by putting taxes up for households in wealthier areas. But you may not be one of the wealthier households in that wealthier area, but will you still face your taxes going up? Plus, in half an hour's time, I'm going to be chatting to the infamous Bonnie Blue. Her real name is actually Tia Billinger. She's a controversial porn star. She shot to fame after her public challenge on OnlyFans to sleep with I don't know why someone wrote sleep with, to have sex with 1,000 complete strangers in 12 hours. Why am I talking to her? Well, not to publicise what she does. Trust me, she's making millions. She doesn't need my help with that. But I want to know why so many young women just like her think that selling their bodies for sex to complete strangers is a completely ordinary and normal and just fine thing to do. If the money's big enough, will you do anything for it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But a lot of people very cross online about me interviewing her. Oh, don't give her publicity. Quite a lot of abusive language as well. And she says she does get a lot of abuse and death threats. Indeed, needs to have security to be in public as a result of it. You might say, oh, well, she deserves it. Well, I don't think anyone deserves to get any abuse or death threats or physical threats. But I've got a top tip. Maybe listen to the interview before you have a judgment on the interview. Maybe that's an idea. You might have seen the Channel 4 documentary. You might pretend you don't know about Bonnie Blue. You might not know about Bonnie Blue. You might know about Bonnie Blue. But I'm interviewing Tia Billinger, who kind of plays Bonnie Blue. She says they're the same person, but are they? I want to find out. We're going to be talking about that. Of course, there may be some language that a lot of people might not want their children to hear. I know it's the summer school holidays, so maybe between 11:30 and 12, you might want to, perhaps if you've got kids around, not have a volume up. I'll give you that warning before 11:30 as a reminder as well. But, you know, it's an interview that I want to do, and I think it's going to be worth listening to. Trust me, I've done this for a long time. Benjamin Butterworth is also with me today, journalist and broadcaster. Just wondering, do you think we shouldn't be be interviewing someone because someone's doing something we may or may not disapprove of and making a lot of money, and it's something that a lot of people consider to be immoral? Should we just go, well, don't talk about it, then it's not happening?
No, because that's not how a free society works. But also, you know, it really is a cultural phenomenon. It's not just Bonnie Blue. She's the person that's become famous and remarkably wealthy. But actually, there are huge numbers of young women and young gay men who are doing this as a career. They're doing it to top up their normal salaries. And for all the people, you know, for a handful making millions, as Tia Billinger is, there are many people making just thousands replicating the same behaviour. And so you sort of start to ask questions about, is this actually what you want society to look like? Is it morally justified? The thing I would want to say is that, does it not tell us a lot more about men than it does women?
Oh, completely. Absolutely. I think that's the really interesting thing, but also some of the way she speaks about herself, which I find very distressing. But maybe I'm just Mary Whitehouse now. I don't know. But anyway, we're going to be talking about that with her a little bit later on. Let's talk about these migrants being detained. 1 in, 1 out is the deal. It came into force on Wednesday afternoon. Some migrants were detained. We're told they were facing deportation to France. People are always detained when they get off those boats. There's, you know, who are you? What's your, you know, where are you from? And then you're sent off to a hotel. They're no longer allowed to detain people. That's why they're in hotels. And then they move from hotels to what would have been otherwise family homes, which then British people don't get to live in, because they can't be. The human rights lawyers got involved, and you can't just detain people for the length of time it takes to actually deport anybody. Otherwise, people will be sitting in detention camps for years on end. That's the argument. The argument, of course, is to get rid of them sooner, and you need to change human rights laws at home and abroad for that. But these people are being detained. We're told some of them will be deported. Do you believe a single one of these, let's face it, young men are going to ever be sent home to France? And does that in any way solve the problem when we're going to get someone back from France? No doubt they'll choose a very sort of, you know, heartwarming case of a woman with her 3 young children, a widow or something, as a case of someone who's a genuine asylum seeker. And then we'll go, oh, well, of course, we'd rather have her than a 22-year-old young man who's come illegally on the boat. But does this solve the problem? Have the government really grasped what the actual concern of the British public is? Well,
I think some people will be deported under this. The problem is that when the maximum could be 50 a week and you've got 800 a day sometimes coming into the country, well, that isn't dealing with the problem on any serious scale. And I don't think that's what the British public are asking for. They're asking for something rather more dramatic. I also think, you know, maybe it will free up some of the cost, because if these people are being processed in France and applying in France online as they will, well, that'll be some people that aren't in hotels, that aren't with caseworkers. So it'll probably save a small amount of money. But all of this is, for want of a better phrase, you know, a drop in the channel, right? It's not dealing with the serious issue.
Yeah, but do you think that's because Keir Starmer, Yvette Cooper and others, they don't really get it? This is my argument I've been making for months. They don't actually think it's a problem. They're playing along with, well, everyone else seems to think it's a problem, we're down in the polls, maybe we should do something. But they don't actually think it's a problem. I think the Tories, a lot of them, not all of them, thought it was a problem. We're just too hopeless to do anything about it and too lily-livered.
I do think that they understand it's a problem. I don't believe that they simply accept that these people are coming across, because, you know, people die in the Channel, right? It's horrific.
Do you know what?
And it's
I don't care anymore. And I know that sounds really terrible. I no longer care. It's been publicised enough now that this is a dangerous route. If you decide to put yourself, you're looking at that dinghy. I've been on like one of those sort of, you know, those kind of boats when there's been like 6 of us on those kind of boats going from the mainland to the Isle of Wight. It was bleeding terrifying, absolutely terrifying on just the waters there. The idea that I would get on a dinghy, which is clearly meant for, I don't know, 10 people, and there are 50 or 60 of us
80.
piled on, 80 in some cases now, all the way there. They've got mobile phones, they can look up. What is the distance? Is it just a little lake I'm going across? Let's stop thinking these people are all stupid. They've got mobile phones, they know what they're doing. If you choose to get on one of those rickety dinghies, I'm sorry, I don't think you're my problem or my responsibility. And if you're in front of me, I would try and stop you from drowning. I don't want people to drown. I think the parents who put little kids on should be sodding well sent to prison for the rest of their lives, putting their children's lives at risk.
But doesn't it tell you how desperate they are? That
no,
they do it
they're
even...
in France. France. They're in France. I'm desperate to go to France.
But I think these people are desperate.
They're not desperate.
And many of them...
They might have been desperate when they left Syria or something, but they're not desperate by the time they've reached any part of Europe.
Well, the main nationality at the moment is Sudanese. And, we talk about Gaza. The worst famine in the world is in Sudan. It's in its capital, Khartoum.
Well, these young men don't look very starving.
And so these people are in horrific situations.
But the women and the children aren't.
Yeah, of course.
The elderly and the women and the children, they miraculously somehow cope with living in Sudan or Eritrea or Somalia or Afghanistan, but the men leave.
I mean, huge numbers of people in Sudan are dying from famine.
But we don't care about them. They're not in Gaza and it doesn't involve Israel. You know that.
Indeed,
you know that.
No one talks about it. But I point that out because, many of these, at the moment, most of these migrants are Sudanese. That's the top nationality.
So you leave Sudan because there's hunger and there's civil war and everything, and there's many other countries that have that. You leave those countries. Well, the moment you've left that country, you're no longer desperate, are you?
But hang on,
you're somewhere safe.
But by that logic, it would mean that the countries that happen to be closest to there would take hundreds and hundreds
and hundreds of thousands. That's literally how it works. That's why Poland has got all the people from Ukraine, and that's why Jordan has got loads of Palestinians. This is and if Ireland were invaded, they would all come to Britain or whatever. That's what happens. Yes.
I'm afraid I think we have a moral responsibility.
Well, I don't have a moral responsibility to people in Somalia. No, I don't. I don't.
I think people that are fleeing persecution, you have a moral responsibility.
We're not fleeing persecution. You're saying they're hungry and they're living in a basket case civil war country. Well, yes. Well, why don't you try and help sort out your own country?
I mean, that's fine. Actually, the thing that would fix these things would be for them to develop economically, and maybe if they didn't have so many wars, that would stop them wanting to flee. Because many of these people, they don't really want to leave their country. They just feel like it's the only way to get a quality of life. They would gladly go back.
And I understand. And if I were in their position, I would probably want to do the same. However, British people do not have a duty of care to the other 7 billion people on the planet who want to come for a better life in Europe or America.
So you don't think that we should take 100,000 or 50,000 refugees a year? You don't think that we should take a similar number to Germany or France or Spain?
I don't think we should make policy based on something that Germany did. By the way, Germany has virtually tried to close their border to a lot of the asylum seekers. I think a lot of the people who are travelling are not the people who are most in need. I think we should absolutely look at. I think we're all very welcoming for mothers and children coming out of Ukraine to keep their children safe when Putin first invaded, with a view to them going home later on, which many of them already done.
What's different between someone fleeing Kiev and someone fleeing Khartoum?
Because we're talking about particularly a war in Europe, and I do say, yes, I think in Europe we have more of a duty of care to people closer to home.
Just the same.
Well, they're all human. Well, okay. There are, was it 8 billion people on the planet right now? So we have a duty of care to them. Most of the people on the planet right now have a worse quality. I know our country's a bit rubbish at the moment. Most people on the planet have a worse quality of life than us. Lots of billions of people live in a country where they are struggling every day to feed their children. Billions of people don't have the same human rights we have. They don't have equality. Billions of women, don't have equal rights. Billions of, hundreds of millions of gay men and gay women don't have equal rights. Do we have a duty of care for all of them to come and live in our country? I would say we should do that colonial thing of trying to actually impart our Western values to those countries, but then we're told off for doing that.
But if that's the argument, then why would you still take people from Ukraine? That's my point.
But that's on a temporary basis.
But you're saying...
That's women and children on a temporary basis while that war is ongoing, and lots of those have already gone home.
I mean, but the argument is, if you say that we can't take the world's ill, then how are you choosing who you do take? Because
we take closer to home.
Frankly, people in Khartoum,
But we have a duty. Well, we did have a duty of care to Ukraine because we actually signed a treaty guaranteeing Ukraine's safety when they gave up nuclear weapons. So we do have a duty of care towards Ukraine.
But also, there are lots of people in Afghanistan who fought with our troops and were translated.
Yeah, and we have a duty of care to them. Most British people agree with that. Right, but not any Tom, Dick or Mohammed or Harry who wants to come over.
But at the same time, Afghanis have a very high number of sex crimes against women conducted compared to other nationalities. Mm-hmm. And so lots of people say, you shouldn't take any Afghanis by that logic, right?
Well, I think that I don't say we shouldn't take any. But there's a difference between people from Afghanistan who've come over on the boats who are living here and people who have come over through the scheme where they have been working side by side with British soldiers and we promised them we would keep them safe. That's a completely different group of people. I like to think, maybe I'm wrong, but I like to think.
I think it's a fantasy, first of all, to say that you just can't take anybody from around the world. I think we have a moral responsibility and also...
but where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line? I mean, you're saying, this is where the left goes. This is that whole but we've got duty of care to everybody and they've got worse lives than us. Okay, so we'll take those 40 women and children, and then we can feel better about ourselves, pat ourselves on the back, and I don't know, put a ribbon or a flag in our Twitter bio, and then we're virtually signalling. But that doesn't actually solve the problem that these countries are facing. Most of these problems need to be solved. The people basically, you've got war-torn countries, you've got organised criminals, you've got kleptocratic leaders, you've got religious nutters. That's not solved by us taking the people all the victims. We can't take all the troubled people of the world. We don't have enough room. We're full.
But that's why I think you should have things like quotas to accept a certain number each year.
And then sod the rest of them.
Well, yeah, you have to.
That's what you're basically saying. So the rest of
you clearly have to draw the line somewhere, evidently, because there are hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people in this situation. But the idea somehow that you shouldn't take any, that you shouldn't feel any debt to these people.
We should take some, but in particular circumstances, people who've been politically persecuted and others. We do already do that.
But the people coming over in the boats, as I say,
they're young
are from the worst famine in the world. They have been through atrocities. You know, Sudan is a horrendous situation.
And they've left their mothers, their sisters, their daughters. They've left them to starve and get beaten and raped by the... Yeah, these are great men. We absolutely want...
It's not their fault
but they don't travel with their women, do they? They leave the women and the weakest and the youngest and the eldest to their plight. Why should we care about them? They don't care about their own families.
But as you said earlier, when they get here, they can bring their relatives. So maybe they're not doing it to be selfish. They're doing it because it's the
goodness
anchor
of their little hearts.
I think it's pretty grim to talk about people from this horrific situation as though they are opportunistic rather than
they want to come here for a better life.
Instinct.
And if I were them, I'd want to do the same. I don't think at the same time them wanting a better life is my duty. There are people in Britain who want to have a better life. They go, I don't want to go to work and do a boring 9-to-5 job. I want to claim benefits and not have to go to work to get the same amount of money. Well, fine, that's great. I love you want a better life by doing nothing, but I don't have a duty of care to you.
But as I said, by that argument, you wouldn't take Ukrainians. And let's be honest.
No, that's not. We have a duty of care to Ukrainians because we signed a treaty.
But that was a political decision, just like this could be. Someone in Lviv, for example, on the European side of Ukraine, has not been particularly affected by the war.
No, and they went home. People went to Lviv and stayed in Lviv.
And yet they would have a right to come here. But someone in the midst of a horrific civil war and famine in the capital of Sudan would have no right. That doesn't feel like a fair way to distribute it.
But again, let's have a duty of care to everyone all around the world. Or why don't the countries neighbouring those countries have a duty of care to them? At the end of the day, the biggest number of Ukrainian refugees, women and children, actually they've gone to Poland by a huge percent. Neighbouring countries do end up taking, same as Jordan taking the Palestinians and the like. That is Turkey taking Syrians. That's how it works. That's the real world. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I wonder whose side you're on. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Yeah, well, because they're sane like me. Text on 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. First channel migrants being detained. We're told they're going to be sent back. We're told, do you think they ever will be sent back? And what is our duty of care to the rest of the world? I really would love to know what you think it is. We'll take your calls up next. 11:30. Bonnie Blue, Tia Billinger is her real name, will be in the studio, and we'll get to talk to her about why so many young women think that selling their bodies online is a proper job. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
I've been alerting the solar farm developers, Mike, who want to desecrate hundreds and hundreds of square miles of our glorious British countryside and farmland with these revolting solar panels. Yeah. And I've made it very clear to them that there's no mandate for this whatsoever. In Lincolnshire alone, just get this, there are plans for about 100 square miles of solar farms. Some villages are going to be completely and utterly surrounded.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:23 is the time. Let's get to your messages and calls coming in thick and fast about the migrants. Some of the messages, Neil says, there's never any footage or proof of people being sent back. Funny that. Oh, do you remember when we had that plane in Luton on the ground waiting for the deportations for Rwanda, and just one by one the migrants were led off as their lawyers' claims were made. Jen says it's embarrassing, not good enough. When they talk about it, it's embarrassing. They're clueless. They make me cringe. Detained, deport the next day, not bloody weeks later. Bob says we still have the same amount that came on the boats. We have to take any they send us. We still have to pay for them. And Gordon says the one that comes in will be classed as illegal and will benefit from all that goes with it, including being able to claim all of its family to come and live here too. Exactly the point I've been making, Gordon. So overall, we'll end up with a damn sight worse, and we'll be paying France even more millions for the privilege. And Graham says more government illusion won't make any difference. Well, let's talk to Mark, who's on the line in Lincolnshire on this. Good morning to you, Mark. What do you want to say?
Good morning, Julia.
Oh, I love it. He always cheers me up. Oh, Benjamin like that as well. What do you want to say, my darling?
Yes, lovely old Benjamin, bless his heart. It's in the right place, I get it. He's just sadly a little bit deluded, that's all.
Well, to be fair to you, he's been pretty sane on a lot of this stuff. I think he's come round and, I think I'm gradually rubbing off on him.
Well, he'll get there eventually, you know. Where this issue is concerned, you know, we're going to start detaining them now. Well, they're already detained for like 24, 48 hours before they get their nice luxury hotel. You know, it comes to the thing, it's like, are these people unaware? Do they never look at the pictures of the boats? Do they not look at these things? Because, you know, I'm pretty much working class. And when you come from a working class, you know, council estate, that kind of thing, you get to see what you can pretty much judge people from how they look, how they appear, their attitude, their swagger, all that kind of stuff. So you always pretty much instantly know who the troublemakers are, who the criminals are, who the rabble is, all the rest of it. And I look at every single one of those boats, which are 95% men. Pretty much every boat you see is 100% men. You look at these boats; they do not look like the world's brightest and best.
Well, I don't know. We're told they're all rocket scientists and engineers.
Oh, yeah, obviously. Totally. That's why 80% of them are on benefits for the rest of their lives once they get citizenship. You know, it's absolutely insane to me, all of this stuff. You know, you see the protest. I've seen the videos. You know, these are people that are laughing at protesters outside hotels. They are throwing things at mothers and toddlers outside of hotels. You know, this seems to me, and controversial as it might be to say, but it seems literally like we're importing the world's detritus. They are not the best and brightest people in the world. They're not vulnerable. They're not, you know, what
about our duty? What Benjamin was talking about, our duty of care to people living in war-torn, you know, economic basket case countries.
Well, I don't give a stuff about our duty of care. What about the duty? You know, everything we ever get in this country, Julia, is about human rights of these people. Not one thing is ever said about the human rights of the indigenous people, you know, the people, the natives, the people, or the people that already just live here. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's absolutely insane to me, because the only way that this will ever really change, and I've said this before, Julia, the only real change we'll ever get here is, you know, And it baffles me why Reform still haven't done this to this point. You know, they have all these councils. Why they are not buying properties in the more affluent, you know, leafy suburbs, which are going to be people that are very much open borders, very much all the rest of it, and start plunking HMOs in their community.
Which is what Ron DeSantis did in Florida. He said, fine, you want the boat people, send them up to Martha's Vineyard and all the posh people. And they went, oh, we don't want these people. Oh, you thought it was fine for everyone else to have them. But yeah, I mean, call them at their own game. Absolutely. Mark, I really appreciate that call. Thank you very much indeed. I can feel your frustration, Matt. I feel exactly the same way. Let's talk to Martin now. He's in Cambridge. Morning to you, Martin.
Well, good morning, Julie.
Morning.
Yeah, I've just come off holiday. I went to Charnia in Crete. We literally got home last night. What a fantastic part of the world. And it's
Sorry,
like
is this the tourist board calling in? What's going on?
It's like going back 40 years. I mean, there's no crime. There's all this. It's hundreds of shops, but they have tens of thousands of people coming in every day. You know, tourists and all the rest of it. But there's no crime. So my point is, it's about the kind of people that you're importing, because in effect China is importing tens of thousands of people a day, but there's no trouble being caused. We have basically imported the third world, and we've become a third world country.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah, and we basically put them in cesspit living, multiple occupation and council estates. What do we think is going to happen? These people have no affiliation to this country. They don't want to be part of this country. They are just using it to better themselves through crime. Yeah. And I honestly do believe, Julie, that enough is enough. We have to be hard on this. Anybody with a joint passport, the British and wherever, if they commit a crime, right, they're out. You're just kind of at the point where you're done now. You're absolutely done. I think a lot of people are getting to that point, Martin. Thank you. Appreciate that call. Brief response from Benjamin Butterworth.
I mean, that is the problem. There's a Yemeni refugee I know called Luai Ahmed who moved to Sweden, and he speaks out. He's now a Swedish citizen, and he says he doesn't really like Sweden because he can't believe that after he moved there, it was just like back in Yemen, because the people that have come from those parts of the world haven't assimilated, haven't been integrated, and he says that's where Europe's failing. And to hear that from someone who's done the journey, has Western values, and is horrified by it, and even they're saying, what are you playing
That's
at?
quite telling, isn't it? Thank you very much indeed for that. 11:29 is the time. Up next, we're going to throw Benjamin Butterworth out of the studio just for a little while, and we're going to be inviting in Tia Billinger. You'll know her better as Bonnie Blue. She's a porn star, social media influencer, and she has hit fame after having sex with 1,000 complete strange men, in fact more than that, in just 12 hours. But why do so many young women think she's wonderful, want to emulate her, and why is she earning millions? And why is that now considered to be, well, just completely normal kind of work for so many of our young women? We're going to be talking about that up next. And if you're angry about me talking to her, maybe listen to the interview before you actually have a judgment on it. I'd love to hear a reaction to it afterwards as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. Just coming up to 11:32. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. And now I'm delighted to welcome to the show Bonnie Blue. Not her real name. She's a porn star and social media influencer. Her real name is Tia Billiger. So Tia, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Now, an awful lot of people getting very angry online about me inviting you onto the show. And I'll come to that in a moment. But I just want to say, first of all, I know it's school holidays. I know it's only, 11's time in the morning. So you might be maybe in the car, you might have youngsters with you. If you we're not going to be talking too explicitly because of the time of day, but even if you don't want your youngsters to hear this conversation, your children, maybe tune out. Maybe you can listen to it back later on YouTube. You go to my show, my YouTube page, Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. You can do that. But I just want to give you a warning. The conversation is going to be about pornography. It's a conversation we do need to have, and if you think it's not a conversation we need to have, then perhaps you really do need to listen. But if you've got younger people in the or people of a more sensitive nature with you, maybe tune out for half an hour. I'm just going to say that, okay? You've had the warning. But Tia, thank you so much for joining us. Now,
where do we start?
Where do we start? Okay, look, you came to fame on OnlyFans.
Yeah.
You were making millions on OnlyFans, still making huge sums of money. You've done some. Well, I suppose you made your name out of turning sex into an extreme sport. Mm-hmm. 1,000 men in 12 hours ended up being more than 1,000 men. Yeah, they have sex with you for free. They're complete strangers, but you make money by filming it and putting it online. And then people subscribe and they get to see it. And the Channel 4 documentary last week caused something of an outcry when the advertisers said we don't want to be associated with her. Do you understand why advertisers don't want to be associated with you and why people are angry at you for what you do?
I mean, one of them was an alcohol company, so I don't really understand what their issue could be, because I know Smirnoff Ice was something I used to drink as a kid on the park, and most people do. So they're sort of hypocrites, because they're saying, oh no, it's a bad influence for young people. Okay, well, alcohol is bad, whereas at least sex is pleasurable and it's not damaging.
Alcohol's pleasurable.
Yeah, it is, but it also can be very damaging. It can lead to a lot of people having issues. It depends how you look at it. The sex I'm having is very pleasurable.
Okay, and I suppose that's the thing where people get into. I mean, again, I don't want to go into too many details at this time of day, but apparently I've been told we can use the phrase gangbang. It surprises me. That's
PG.
We're all surprised by that. But you having sex with a number of men at the same time.
Yeah.
Lots of them wearing balaclavas. Yeah. Who've queued up and they've had their STD tests. They've guaranteed that that they are over 18, so it's all legal. But you having sex with a whole bunch of completely strange men, some masked at the same time, telling them they can, do what they want to you. You've used phrases like "destroy me," "do what you want to me," "I want you to rearrange my inside."
See, they're all words that really excite me. Like, I really, really enjoy that. So for me, that's like the best day ever, telling so many guys that I've got blue ski masks, say like, hey boys, come and destroy me, come and rearrange my insides. And for some people, they find that disgusting, they're mortified by it. But me, I honestly love it.
You're not saying it just because you know that's what will get you clickbait and that a lot of men may be titillated by that. You're saying that does it for you as well.
Yeah, I understand that. Everyone wants me to be traumatised. Everyone wants to see me crying, breaking down, and that's what people thought they was going to see in the documentary, but that's not me. If I was trying to put on a show and everything else, then I'd probably try and look more emotional. But that isn't me. I really enjoy this.
Because lots of people were saying, look, and again, the stats are very clear. Women working either in pornography or working as prostitutes. Yeah. The rates of women who have been sexually abused is sky high. Yeah. Who've been abused as children, been in domestic abuse or other sexually abusive relationships. The rate of suicide attempts and suicide among people who've worked in your industry is sky high as well. So the assumption was you've come from an unhappy home, you've been abused, but your family are in the
they're more than supportive, and time again
and your ex-husband, partner of 10 years.
Yeah, and everyone the whole time I've spoke about my ex-husband always being super supportive, and everyone thinks I'm lying. I say I've got a family who support me, they think I'm lying, and then every time I just say and I show the evidence of hey, here's my family and here's my partner, but it's still ignored.
So you kind of break the expectations of a lot of people, which seems to make people more
angry. Yeah.
So people were saying to me online when we put out we were going to interview you, well, why are you publicising this? You know, they're using, you know, a lot of the normal, you know, prostitute, whore, sluts, like they're using an awful lot of words to describe you that often are talked about any woman who enjoys sex.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the thing, right? I don't. You're probably too young to remember. You're in your early 20s. You're probably too young to remember Mary Whitehouse. But in my day, when I was a bit younger than you, it was a really big thing at the time where there was a woman, very you know, she looked like she was out of a different age, basically saying we shouldn't have any sex or anything on television, and even the sight of a nipple was shocking at that time. That's how much things have changed. And I think you're probably going to be thinking, God, I'm sitting here with this today's version of Mary Whitehouse. I've raised in a very liberal family, very liberal attitudes towards things like sex and things, and talking about it, being open and the like. My main feeling when I watched the documentary was sadness.
Okay.
And even though you're this beautiful young woman, you say you're feeling very empowered.
Yeah.
You say that, you know, and you're earning millions. You probably don't have to do another day's work in your life if you don't want to. You say you're enjoying what you do. Your family are there surrounding you. But my main feeling was sadness. And the reason I felt sad was that I felt, and again, I'd love to hear your answer to this. I think you're kidding yourself. Why? And is that an attitude you often get from people, especially women?
Everyone thinks I'm lying. Everyone thinks when I say I'm enjoying it, it's clickbait. I'm saying it just because it's my job to say I enjoy it. But really,
she would say that, wouldn't she?
Yeah, of course. And I understand that. And I think, you know what, put me on a lie detector test, because I honestly enjoy it. I get so much pleasure from it. And I can understand for most people, they'd be repulsed by it. But
particularly most women.
Yeah, 100%. But for me, I really do have fun, and I'm really grateful to do what I do.
But this wasn't something that you were doing in your personal life before you started making money. I've listened to a long podcast and watched the Channel 4 documentary. You led a very normal life. You know, you had a sort of childhood teenage childhood sweetheart. You married him. He's in the video in the documentary. Normal life, and then you realised you could make money and have a more interesting life by selling sex. Now. Do you regard sex work, and you don't charge the men you have sex with, but you charge people to watch you having sex with these men? So it's slightly different, but you said quite openly you don't care if someone calls you a prostitute.
No.
It doesn't bother you?
The definition of what I do, I'm really not bothered whether it's, I'm not going to list them all, but no matter what you call me, I'm not offended by it, because I'm really proud of what I do, and whatever category that falls in, I always say as long as it's above board and legal, I really can't be offended by anything you say.
And I suppose that's where I sort of start questioning, like, is it something that should be legal? Because a lot of feminism these days is about female empowerment.
Yeah.
And it's, your body, your choice, you want to do it. We should believe women.
I don't know, they seem to be crying about the fact I now use my body to make money, and if anything, I have men on their knees as opposed to the other way round. But now, unfortunately, women are still crying about that.
And you think they're wrong because...
They've always got to be whinging about something. Can't they just be happy? Can't they just see a woman that's independent? I don't cook, I don't clean, I don't do any of that. I just have sex, I earn a lot of money from men, and I'm happy. But they've still got an issue with that.
Do you think that you're using the men, not them using you?
I mean, I always say, to the men, look, honestly, use me, rearrange my insides and all of that.
Yeah, every time you say that phrase, I kind of recoil. Why?
Yeah.
What does that... I mean...
It's just like...
You're basically saying, I mean, you say to men, and you've said in videos, you know, strangle me, slap me, spit on me.
God, you sound like you're about to start one of my videos.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be making the same money as you. Urinate on me, all these things. And I get, look, we've had, 50 Shades of Grey, which apparently is very, very popular, very tame compared to the stuff that you talk about. I think there are women who might, maybe think they might do an OnlyFans account, which is where you kind of started making your money, or some women we know work as escorts. We've got university students saying, look, instead of waitressing 7 shifts a week, I can just do, a couple of hours and I make the same money. But you're not talking about having sex, you're talking about an extreme sport, something that could be very dangerous. I don't understand, again, maybe it's just my age, I don't understand why any woman would want a complete stranger, let alone 5 or 6 of them surrounding them, wearing masks, strangling them. I find that utterly depraved and sad and terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, for one, sex with one person could be dangerous. Just because you're having sex with multiple people, it doesn't necessarily increase the levels of
Do you have security in the room?
Yes, I have security.
Doesn't that tell you that it's dangerous, though? Because most people, when they have sex with people, don't feel the need to have security in the room because they don't think they're at risk.
For sure, but I share my location online. Anyone can turn up, especially these middle-aged women that judge and do nothing but scroll on TikTok.
So women turn up?
Well, no, they can't be asked to get off the sofa. If they had some sort of work ethic, then yeah, probably. But the security is more to protect the men than it is me, because these men have never been in a room before with hundreds of guys. They might get something spilt on them. And I don't want there to be sort of arguments or a fight broken out. So the security is to make sure...
So you basically have bouncers to deal with them?
It's never happened, but it's just to make sure everything goes smoothly. And you don't want to be stressing about it.
No, but again, I find it interesting. You were talking about how you now need security even to walk in public. You basically sort of kind of quite isolated now. That's another thing that I thought was sort of a bit sad, that you've got all these millions, everything you wear. I mean, you've probably got watches that cost more than some people's homes, and designer clothes, and you've got all the hair done and all the stuff that a lot of young women would dream about. But do you have a life that is fulfilling?
For sure, like my life has never been more fulfilling. Like what's not shown in the documentary is the fact I get to travel the world. I go to the most beautiful places. I get to
have sex with strange men.
No, not just that. There's another part of my life as well. Like the things that was highlighted in the documentary is all my gangbangs, is all the events. There's a whole nother side to me.
Those are just the extreme events that get you the notoriety.
I do have a life, I mean, my life is gangbangs, but I also have a life aside from that as well. And obviously that wasn't really shown.
And there's life aside from that. A lot of that is, I mean, saying on the documentary, something like 6 hours a day online, talking with men. You often talk about the men who are contacting you via OnlyFans, but now you've got taken off OnlyFans. But as if they are somehow their friends, as if they are, like you work in a paper factory, and then your clients, they're your customers. You talk about them very normally, and you defend them and say these are really nice, normal guys. They're very friendly. When you meet them in the street, they're very friendly. But then you're very, very damning about the women, and again, you've talked about fat women on benefits not willing to get off the sofa. You've said before, they instead worrying about me, they should get off the sofa, they get the sofa and go to the gym, and also that they should be satisfying their men. So are you of the view that the men who want to come and have sex with you, even if they're say married, perhaps to a woman who does look after herself and goes to the gym or whatever it is you think they should do, that's normal and okay for them to do that?
I think everyone's got a different reason to come in to see me. It's not, I used to think, if someone is not sleeping with their wife and they're going elsewhere, that's cheating, they don't love their life, they don't love their family.
If you were married, you wouldn't have wanted your husband to cheat.
For sure, but then when I started speaking to these men and I got to know them on a more personal level, I realised they absolutely adore their wives sometimes. They adore the family life, but they really want sex, they really want to be pleasured. They're working really hard, they're paying the bills, they're looking after the house, and their wife, for whatever reason, no longer wants sex. So my point was, look, if you're not pleasuring your husband, he is going to be going elsewhere, and surely you'd prefer it to be me than someone he works with, someone he sees every day in the office.
Because he's not going to leave his wife for you?
No, it's just you're another guy. Like, obviously, yes, I get to know them really well, but also they know they're one of 1,000.
You're very sympathetic to the men in a way you're not sympathetic to the women.
I've got to know. Maybe if I.
You've got to know them.
100%.
Have you got to know them? A man in person or online?
Both. Obviously, predominantly online. I only do events sort of once a month or once every 6 weeks. So, but online, I can speak to them every day.
And you think you're having an honest, real relationship with those men?
Obviously, I'm not there going, we're officially together, we're going to get married. But you really get to know them on a personal level. You can access Fansly on your phone, on your laptop. It's something. It's like texting, and of course you'd be able to get to know someone very well online.
And you think the men who basically are paying to talk to you are being honest about themselves?
They might be lying, but also who doesn't exaggerate sometimes? Who doesn't lie? If they want to make themselves feel better and tell me they've got, they earn $1 million a year, then so be it.
So you don't know them?
Yeah, everyone varies, and as long as they're coming away from messaging me feeling good, that's the benefit.
We're going to take a quick break. Then I want to talk to you about, I suppose, sex as an extreme sport and how much more extreme it has got in recent years and how much more extreme it can become. But also, I also want to talk to you about why so many other young women think that what you do is great and want to emulate you, because as a mum myself and someone I'm very proud to call myself a feminist, that horrifies me. And we'll come back and we'll talk to you about that up next. Do stay tuned. This is Talk.
I've been alerting the solar farm developers, Mike, who want to desecrate hundreds and hundreds of square miles of our glorious British countryside and farmland with these revolting solar panels. Yeah. And I've made it very clear to them that there's no mandate for this whatsoever. In Lincolnshire alone, just get this, there are plans for about 100 square miles of solar farms. Some villages are going to be completely and utterly surrounded.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:48 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Continue our conversation with Tia Billinger. You may know her better as Bonnie Blue, porn star and social media influencer. Just a reminder again, you might want to be angry about the interview without listening to it. I suggest you go back to the YouTube page and watch it afterwards. But if you have got kids in the car, someone of a more sensitive disposition, we are talking about pornography. It's an important conversation, important debate to have. So if you do feel uncomfortable with that, I recommend turning the radio off just until midday, and I promise you, you can come back then and it will be perfectly safe. In the meantime, welcome back, Bonnie Blue, Tia. Can I say, is Bonnie Blue a character for you, or are you Bonnie Blue now?
It used to be. It used to be fake orgasms. The whole thing was sort of just not me. And then gradually over the years went on. Yeah. Okay. And then as the years went on, it's completely merged.
This is the thing, as the years go on, this is where I'm going to go a bit, 57-year-old mum on you. Okay. Yeah. One of my big worries is about pornography. And, the sort of magazines that I would have found when I was a youngster, and we'd all be shocked by, a man and a woman having sex. Mm-hmm. Literally, that's it. Very, very bog standard, ordinary stuff. And most of my audience, that's what they would have found. What is online now is terrifying. I've said many times on the show, most parents haven't got a clue what not just their kids, but their teenagers, even younger, are seeing online. It
starts a lot younger than what people think.
Much younger, indeed. But also what they're seeing online 2 or 3 clicks away, not on the dark web, on the main sites, through Google, their kids are seeing strangulation, incest, violence, horrible stuff that I'm absolutely horrified by. Yeah. You do this for a living.
Yes.
Are you not in danger of normalising this, not just for men, that this is what women like, you say you enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I think you're lying, I don't know what's in your mind, but also normalising it for young women and girls, thinking this is what they have to do, when you must know that most women don't do or enjoy these things.
No, which is why my queues are so long. But no, what I'm doing to a certain degree isn't normal. It's extreme, like you've said. I know every girl knows this is not their day-to-day sex you have. Even I don't have this sex often, let alone them. And there's loads of things I don't do or I don't consent to. So I'm a clear example of you can consent to one thing and then not the other. You should never feel pressured by anybody to do something you don't want to do.
But the stuff you do consent to and you say that you enjoy, you actually encourage men to slap you and strangle you, use that phrase again, destroy me. I am horrified that any young woman, anyone would think that about themselves, say that about themselves and believe that about themselves.
That's not every time. Like, there'll be sometimes I could have intercourse and I'm not left, you know, with messy hair and makeup smudged all over my face. But then sometimes I want my face to look messy. I want it to look like I've just had sex.
OK, but that's how you look is irrelevant to what you might feel, though. I mean, you say you enjoy it, but the worrying thing is a lot of young women now are being forced into doing things they don't want to do because they think that's what boys want. Boys think it's what girls want. Are you not contributing as part of having done your OnlyFans and the extreme, effectively extreme sports that you do? I mean, and the one that's mentioned in this Channel 4 documentary that you wanted to do and not done yet, I believe, is saying it basically the human zoo, where you would be tied up in a glass box and men could come and do whatever they wanted to you.
Yeah.
Now, I'm so. It's not often I'm struggling with words. I'm so horrified by that. That to me is sexual torture. That is abuse. That is not something that any woman should want to do, be willing to do, that men should be allowed to pay to do. And yet there's a part of me going, well, if you're both consenting adults, what's the issue?
That's the main part. Everyone in that room, including myself, was consenting. Whatever happened within that glass box was me saying, yes, I agree to this. There's loads of different types of sex that people have, and just because they're not, you know, all over social media or they don't talk so proudly about it as I do, you don't realise about it. But the sex I have, to a certain degree, is very consensual. It's discussed beforehand, these consent forms, these IDs, these breathalyzers. If anything, that the consent process is so long in comparison to the time they actually have with me.
Yeah, well, he did the 1,000 men, that was the 40 seconds, I think, they were allowed, because you're actually working on the timing. And yet, are you not contributing to the, I mean, it's phrased, the pornification of society, where women are seen as, and girls are seen as, something, not someone, that men do things to, that they are allowed to physically hurt for their sexual gratification? Even if you say you enjoy it, are you not contributing to that being normalised in a way that it absolutely wasn't in my day? And I think in most people's sex lives it's not. And you normalise that, and you're, in that case, not someone who's just, you know, you're a feminist earning loads of money, millions in the bank, and, and it's all great and wonderful, but actually you are contributing to real life harm.
No, it's the complete opposite. I do really good for society.
You do good for society? In what way?
100%. I mean, the amount of husbands I pleasure, the amount of students I actually educate. Like you said,
you had a barely legal thing where you basically took the virginity of a lot of young men.
For sure. And like you said, they'll be watching online, people being choked, people being slapped. But it's one thing seeing that online, and there's another thing actually performing that.
But we know that more and more young men and boys are doing that to their first girlfriends. And their first girlfriends are going, what the heck?
Yeah, but that girl often is not, you know, loud enough to speak up, say, hey, actually, you don't like it, or I don't want it like this.
Because they've been told it's normal by women like you.
But it's not normal. Every woman, and I've said this the whole time, no one has ever heard me say, you should be choked, you should be spat on.
But when a beautiful young woman like you, who's very successful, you have the Prada handbags, and I'm on, you know, here I am in the Maldives today, and I'm making millions doing this, aren't I successful? I'm empowered, I'm living my best life, and I encourage men to strangle me, slap me, you know, spit on me, and you know, when you say that, you are normalising it to young girls.
But for me, I always say everyone likes different things. Every guy I meet, and even women, have different requirements in the bedrooms, different things that make them finish, things they enjoy and things they don't enjoy. And that's what I say. Learn what you enjoy and speak up about it.
Well, you talk about it being about consenting adults, but I mean, at the end of the Channel 4 documentary, I mean, I have to say that was particularly the bit that really, you know, I found very difficult. You have a sort of a barely legal thing, and we know this is a huge thing in pornography, of particularly young women who look as if they are under 18, but actually are legally over 18. There are a couple of young women in that video. I mean, they look like little girls. I mean, they looked 13, 14. They've got their fake eyelashes and their big hair, but they look like little girls to me. And they were 18, but they're doing OnlyFans.
It was actually 22. 22,
yeah, but OnlyFans accounts, but they were over 18. And you were doing a scene where basically you are a teacher teaching girls and boys, you know, in a classroom, dressed in a school uniform. Again, we have a massive issue with what is going on in terms of grooming gangs, in terms of people, of more and more men looking at underage. Well, I say not as underage porn, it's not children porn, it's sexual abuse when it's a child underage. Again, normalising that sexual urge. Again, aren't you part of the problem? Isn't that part of grooming?
The only difference is if men have done it for years and years and years, and now suddenly the women have done a massive uproar because I'm the older one sleeping with younger men. Men have always slept with people dressed as schoolgirls, people doing role play as schoolgirls, and they don't ever discuss the consent on camera. Whereas during my video that you saw where they was dressed up, we discussed consent. We discussed how to choke properly, how to slap properly.
How to choke. See, when you're having conversations about how to choke properly.
But if I'm not doing that, all those people are going to watch online is a video where they've seen a girl get really roughly choked and it's not been discussed at all. So if that guy then does it to another girl who's freshly 18, how is he not going to hurt her? How does she know to speak up? So I am doing good for society, because if I wasn't doing these sex tapes that show more of the educational side, I mean, the parents aren't teaching them. The parents pretend as if they don't even watch porn.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of people being angry. My thing is, well, this is all happening. Do you consider yourself a feminist, making millions from using your body as you choose?
I always hate that question, because I feel like if I say I am, people are going to cry about it. If I say I'm not, people say, actually, you do a lot for women. So I sort of sit on the border. You're not going to see me doing
just
no
not
petitions.
words you like.
Yeah.
You think, come on, you're in one video, you're talking about, feminists have been moaning and whinging for 100 years.
They are,
and still moaning and
suddenly, instead of using their voice and their platform to talk about, men unfortunately hurting women a lot, or doing something which is going to help make a difference, they're crying about me doing consensual sex and saying I'm promoting things.
Your mother says she supports what you do. She said, look, basically, if anyone, I defy anyone, not to, lose the morals they claim to have effectively for £1 million a month. But I don't think I would earn £1 million a month. But no, I wouldn't do what you do for £1 million a month, or even £10 million a month. And I think most women wouldn't. But I'm worried that more and more young women would do that because they've seen your success. But would you want your own daughter, if you ever did have a child? Now, you talked about your difficulties having children, you'd need IVF, but would you ever want your own daughter? Would you encourage your own daughter to do what you do?
And you're going to think I'm sort of telling lies, but if they genuinely wanted to do this...
Genuinely wanted completely strange men in balaclavas to strangle them?
Yeah, I would honestly support them. I'd have to explain all the risks, all the dangers, but the world's a dangerous place regardless now. You could be walking down the street and you might as well have security.
Well, I don't think as a general rule, I've managed to go my whole way through life without anyone strangling me or being gangbanged. I mean,
it depends what type of sex you like.
Yeah, no, and again, that's why I get it comes back to the consent issue.
Like, I'll never argue or say you shouldn't find it disgusting or you shouldn't find it repulsive. I just really dislike it when you try and make a statement, not yourself, but for many other people I've sort of spoke to, they're like, those men are disgusting, these men are this. And I'm like, how can you be so poorly educated that you're making a statement, yet I've never spoke to them, you've never even got to know them, whereas my whole life is dedicated to having sex with them and getting to know them. And
well, that's why I wanted to speak to you in person rather than judging you. Bonnie Blue, time is up. I really appreciate you coming, and I appreciate your honesty in the answers. She's a porn star social media influencer. She's actually Tia Billinger.
Maybe I'll see you at my event on Saturday.
I think you probably won't. I think realistically you will not. I'd like to hear your reaction, your thoughts on what Tia had to say. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. If you have turned the radio down because you get kids in the car, you can turn it back up again now, I promise. We're going to get the latest headlines, so we're going to be talking about what is going on possibly with the meet between Trump and Putin, possibly Zelensky too, over peace in Ukraine. That's up next. This is Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. 2 minutes past 12 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for your company. If you've just tuned back in after the conversation with the porn star Bonnie Blue, I think you've missed an interesting conversation. I think it's probably not at all what you thought it would be. Because I'm not after the clickbait. I'm after trying to understand why a woman would do what she does and the influence that will have on other young women and young men. So hopefully you found that useful and interesting, as certainly as interesting as I found it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what she had to say. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Whether you are listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's great to have your company. If you say you've just tuned back in again, great to have your company again back now. Don't forget, if you do miss any of the show, you want to watch that interview back, go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe so you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, well, we've got the Bank of England. They've just announced in the last 3 minutes they have cut interest rates, the base rate from 4.25% to 4%. This was very much expected. We're now at the lowest level in more than 2 years. Very, very good news if you've got a tracker mortgage. Hopefully, sort of maybe long-term good news if you haven't. But of course, you know, we'll wait and see if that is the last cut we're going to see for quite a while. Also going to be talking more about those Channel migrants, so the ones who arrived yesterday. Some of those have been detained. Well, they will be detained over this period anyway, but may face actually being returned to France. I don't think any of us believe most of them actually will be returned to France. And anyway, we're going to get someone back in and possibly even all of their extended family. Oh, plus the other 750 who arrived this week anyway. So are we going to be better off? I think we're pretty sure we won't be, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Text on 87222 to have your say. You can get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Also going to be talking in the next few moments about Donald Trump meeting up with Vladimir Putin as early as next week. A possibility of a meeting also with Volodymyr Zelensky, the three men together to discuss a ceasefire in Ukraine. Do you think it'll ever happen? Well, we'll talk to a guest about that in just a couple of moments. Plus talk about the civil servants working at the HMRC tax office who, instead of answering your phone call when you were asking for help about your tax affairs, were at a seminar on the guilt of being British. Well, most of them work from home as well. Plus, we're going to be talking about the government minister, Rushanara Ali. She's evicted 4 tenants from one of the houses that she rents out before upping the monthly rent by £700. The landlord MP, who owns 2 rental properties, is also, quite by coincidence, Labour's homelessness minister. I kid you not. She has fought famously against private renters being exploited and championed reform against unreasonable rent increases, but evicted 4 tenants before putting the rent up. Don't do what I say, don't do what I do, just completely be a Labour hypocrite. But there we are. All of that coming up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that as we get to it. Benjamin Butterworth has joined us back in the studio. Benny Blue, I think you're calling yourself now. Benjamin Butterworth, journalist.
It makes me £1 million a month.
Well, indeed. What did you make of my conversation with Bonnie Blue? Because bearing in mind, people go, oh, you're just publicising her. I mean, she mentioned something, rent coming. No, I'm not publicising. But I think it's really interesting when young women are making a lot of money, and when this particular woman making millions, we're told, millions, and living the life of Riley, she claims, by selling her body for sex, sometimes sex, I think, is quite disgusting, horrible sex, and which even she admits is not normal, that when that is celebrated by so many people and vilified by others, but it's part of the pornification of our society, I think we should have a conversation about it, but include the person who is doing it, rather than just sort of sit there berating her or idolising her.
Yeah, I mean, look, she's an intelligent woman.
Clearly.
She's a great marketeer, ultimately, because that's why she's become incredibly famous.
She's a businesswoman.
There are a lot of people doing this, and we don't know their names like we know Tia or Bonnie Blue's name. So in that sense, you know, she seems like a reasonable, impressive person. And do we have a right to morally judge someone that is legally making money and paying their taxes?
And what she does is legal.
And we really need those taxes,
right?
Should
it be legal? Should you be able to make money paying men who strangle you? I just don't know if you should.
Ultimately, I'm afraid I think she's fundamentally disingenuous. I do not believe, you put the question yourself, that if there were not a financial reward for this, she would not choose to do those behaviours. And the fact is that actually she is a caricature of what men want. And so in what way is that empowering? In what way is that feminist? It's not. And I thought the bit that frustrated me was she said, well, I'm doing a public service because actually I sort of educate people on how to do some of these slightly extreme acts in the bedroom. Well, actually, no, what you're doing is sort of humanising some of that extreme behaviour to make it seem even more normal. Just because you put a little emotional edge on being slapped around doesn't make that acceptable. And look, people can do those things in the bedroom. That's people's consenting choices, but when you try and make it look like it's the norm, the assumption, the mainstream, you can profit off it, I think it's grim.
Yeah, and again, people talk about this stuff being normalised now, but well, only because they've seen it in porn. They weren't doing it in my day. And maybe some people were, but no, average person. What has been, and again, I think most parents right now, if you've got late primary school age children or teenage children or kids in their 20s, trust me, you have no idea what they're actually seeing. And I keep telling everybody, go to Google, put the word porn in, look at the first few pages of the first thing. We're not talking about the dark web. You need to know what's out there, and the education you think your kids have got about these things. It's very different from what they're seeing online and what they now think is normal. I think we are in really, really dangerous territory. And if you're not talking about it, you're pretending it's not happening. And that's why I wanted to talk about it. If you want to have your say about the interview, do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Right now, let's turn our attention to matters of state, matters of great international affairs. Let's talk about Donald Trump, and who is apparently going to be meeting with Vladimir Putin as early as next week, possibly even a meeting between the three men, including Zelensky, to talk about a ceasefire in Ukraine. How likely is that, though? Let's talk to Robert Courts Casey. He's a former Tory MP, former Solicitor General and former Chair of the Defence Select Committee in the House of Commons. Very good afternoon to you, Robert.
Afternoon.
Thanks for joining us. So, look, it looks like we may get this first face-to-face meeting between Trump and Putin as early as next week. First one since 2018, Donald Trump's first term. But do you think that is going to lead to any more likelihood of a ceasefire? Zelensky seems to think there is more hope than there was. But at the end of the day, has anything changed for Vladimir Putin?
Well, we'll always approach this with some trepidation, really, and I think the scales have fallen from the president's, Donald Trump's, eyes in terms of how reasonable and realistic Putin is. As we all know, that Putin is a bloodthirsty aggressor, and he is purely out for what is his interests or Russia's interests as he sees them. And if he doesn't get then he will take the view that he's already occupying a lot of Ukrainian territory. He is engaged in a war of attrition, which is the way that the Russians always fight. And if he isn't given what he thinks is in his interests, he won't come to the table.
Well, that's it.
And then he'll come to the table, but not actually make a deal.
Well, indeed. He'll string Donald Trump along. He's been stringing him along all this time. It does look hopeful that Donald Trump's patience has been wearing thin, and perhaps has realised he's being made to look like a chump, which he has been by Vladimir Putin. But even when Donald Trump gave that original 50-day deadline for there to be a ceasefire, that was basically, it was 50 days when Vladimir Putin was hoping, over the summer months, he was going to be making a lot of progress in terms of taking, places like Kherson and other places in the Donbass region. The thought is that he may well come to the table once he's achieved the military ends he hopes he can realistically achieve, whilst the war is sort of bogged down as it has been in this, you say, this war of attrition. But fundamentally, even if you get Putin and Trump in the same room, and even with Zelensky there, with or without a suit on, at the end of the day, Vladimir Putin doesn't want to walk away with a defeat, does he?
Well, that's it. It's not only he doesn't want to, he can't, because his entire reputation, his political career, and indeed probably his actual life depends upon him being successful as he sees it. So he won't be able to walk away with anything that is acceptable, probably in anyone else's terms. When you put that against Zelensky's understandable desire to see his country liberated after everything they've been through, there's a real mismatch in what each side can see.
Yeah, and Donald Trump seems to think, and he said, he'd solved the whole problem in 24 hours. He's for peace, not war. Bang their heads together and everything will be fine. But it's just not how it works. And he does seem to think also that economic sanctions will make a difference. But they have such, Vladimir Putin thinks that Ukraine should be Russian, and Volodymyr Zelensky thinks that Ukraine should be Ukrainian. I'm not sure there is any middle ground there, other than, OK, you get to keep Crimea, but would you get to keep some of the Donbass region as well? I mean, we're talking about 20% of Ukrainian territory being handed over to a hostile nation state. Even if that were something that Volodymyr Zelensky could agree to, the Ukrainian people could suffer after all the bloodshed and hardship they've gone through, there needs to be a guarantee that Putin takes not a single inch more. And I'm not sure anyone would trust a guarantee, even by Donald Trump or by the European Union right now.
No, well, you shouldn't. I mean, you shouldn't trust any guarantee that's been by Vladimir Putin. We've seen in the past how he behaves. He's very clear and open, actually, in reality, of what he wants. He believes in a greater Russia, which maps more or less the same confines as the old Soviet Union. He wants to restore Russia to what he sees as its great place in the world, and he's utterly unscrupulous about what way he's going to go about doing it. The only thing really that can guarantee all of that is that the West makes it impossible, not just impossible for Russia to win, but makes it possible for Ukraine to win. Only when he's faced with the situation where he knows that coming to the table is his least worst option is he likely to
Indeed. Well, the economic sanctions make a difference. A lot of this is about the secondary sanctions, say, 50% tariffs on India. And there's still this talk about possibly going back up again for Chinese tariffs, but not just yet. And that's because we've got, sanctions from the West on the sales of oil and gas, which is where Vladimir Putin gets the money to fund his war effort from. They sell to India and China, and by the way, India then sells on to European countries. So I'm not even sure those sanctions really work at all anyway. But basically, we need to cut off his access to money. But the reality is, if we were really serious about this, we'd have done this already, wouldn't we?
Well, we've done a lot in terms of what the UK's done. I mean, international sanctions are really complicated, and initially we did a whole raft of everything that was quick and easy and straightforward to do. The problem, you put your finger on it a moment ago, because you talk about how people go around the outside. And if you look at Russia, for example, they have this vast shadow fleet, as it's called, which enables them to keep on selling oil. And you've got to keep working on the ways to constrict all of that. But you've got to, as you rightly say, it's the secondary sanctions, and it's working on those partners who aren't really aligned with one camp or another. You've got the West, who are fairly straightforward in terms of the action they'll take. Then you've got Russia and its allies, but there's a whole bunch of people in the middle, and it's people like India, where their interests are much, are in a grayer area, and it's working on them and getting them to take more action, which gives us the ability to starve off the money that's fueling Putin's war.
It does seem to me at this stage, was it February 2022 we had the invasion? It seems to me at this stage, there shouldn't be a single new sanction to be able to add on. They should have already been on and cut off those supplies. It seems to me that Vladimir Putin it's just in a war of attrition, as you say, and he's just basically waiting for the West to basically lose. We've lost enough weaponry, we haven't got enough money, we're all going to lose interest. We're all focused on Gaza now, and Donald Trump's going to lose interest as well, and basically he's just going to wait it out.
Yeah, I mean, we know that's the view that our adversaries take of us, that the West just can't focus its own attention on anything.
Well, they're right.
For a period of time. Frequently they are, yeah. I mean, that's right. Public attention moves on, some other scandal takes place, some other crisis blows up, and it could be another foreign policy crisis, or it could be domestic. And that's what happens. And it was, to a certain extent, the trouble with living in democratic society, and, we wouldn't ever have it any other way. But, there's a
downside.
There's a downside in foreign policy terms, which is that we have to keep looking at whatever happens now rather than the longer term.
Indeed. And what about in terms of the other big foreign policy issue? I mean, Stephen Witkoff, the American president's golf buddy and apparently envoy on everything, certainly not an expert in any of these fields. He's also been dealing with issue in Gaza and dealing with Israel as well. What do you make of the leading global scholars, apparently, who have signed a letter urging the UK to end the ban under proscribed terrorist status of Palestine action?
It won't surprise you, I don't have any sympathy for them and have no time for anything they've said. I don't accept the view they are leading scholars, for one thing.
I have to say, I don't think they are, looking down the list of names.
Well, I don't think they are on those terms, but in any event, it's the same old hard left, self-hating, anti-Western cast that we've seen before. Look, it's pretty simple. You can think whatever you like about whatever you like, provided you do so peacefully. The minute you start damaging things or people, you're a criminal. And when you start taking action against the UK's national interest, then you become a terrorist. This move was absolutely right. Who'd know you'd hear me praising a Labour government, but they're absolutely right to have taken the action they have against...
I'm surprised they've taken it, I have to say.
Yeah, to a certain extent, so am I, because there are a lot of people who will be supporting them who frankly should know better. There's a lot of people within the UK who will be writing to their MPs right now and saying this action against Palestine action ought not to take place. All that they're doing is protesting, and that is utterly misguided.
Well, I find it interesting. I'm not sure most people would have heard of this organisation before. What do you make of it? My guest Benjamin Butterworth in the studio a little bit earlier said, the thing is, you've got demonstration after demonstration. We had another 3 charges being brought today, but we've got, lots of people. They're planning, I think, another day of action at the weekend, basically saying we do support Palestine Action. Now that is currently a criminal offence to do that, and saying, look, the police can't handle it. It makes a mockery of our laws because the police can't arrest everybody, and we know then they're not arresting everybody who's shouting outrageous anti-Semitic stuff and carrying placards and shouting slogans on those supposedly pro-Gaza marches that, of course, are lots of them are hate marches. So does this make a mockery because the police don't take action and early enough, soon enough, with enough people?
Well, the police have got to be absolutely clear that they control the streets, and the minute that protesters get the impression that the police don't and they won't take action, then we'll simply get more of this. And you're absolutely right. That's precisely what we've seen with those hate marches over the course of the last 18 months or so. Now, the people who are supporting Palestine Action have just got to be really clear about the sort of people that they are supporting. This is not some cuddly little protest group. This is a violent group that has taken action against people in the most violent and intimidatory terms, and they really should think very, very carefully about what it is they're supporting.
Let's also talk about, you worked in the Conservative government as Solicitor General, but what do you make of this extraordinary revelation that a whole hour of HMRC tax staff either working from home, so maybe they had to stop walking the dog for that moment, or in the office, was taken up on Wednesday by them attending a seminar on the guilt of being British. It was billed as a powerful, interactive and reflective listening circle exploring the emotional complexity of being South Asian and British, covering topics including the emotional weight of colonial history as part of the commitment to diversity, equity and inclusion, which I thought was particularly interesting, given that the Chancellor of, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, would have been a South Asian British man by heritage. I'm just not entirely sure that he ever felt he had to explore the emotional complexity of that.
I mean, the thing is, this isn't just one event. There's a whole load of these things that are going on. It's what happens within the civil service network, and this is on work time. It's not like people are doing this after work and it's their own, their own views and they're free to explore them. This is when they're taking off time from running the country. And what we want is the people who are running the country to be proud of the country and to be advancing its interests.
But it's very telling, isn't it, how many people working in the public sector, it would appear, or I mean, maybe it's just their HR departments, but even anybody, you're working as a public servant to the British government, i.e. the British people, and you think that your country is a bad place and you should be guilty of being British and guilty and regretful of the colonial history of this country. I don't regret anything.
No. I mean, I'm very proud to be British, and our history is an outstanding one. We've done so much good in the world and all sorts of things that we should be very proud of.
And less bad than a lot of other countries.
Absolutely right. Well, you look at British history, and we don't always get everything right because nobody does. That's human nature. But we're always trying to do the right thing. And actually, by and large, the vast majority of the time, Britain comes out very well or outstandingly of its historic history. I mean, we are the country, after all, that stood up against tyranny at huge personal cost.
And slavery.
And well, exactly right, slavery. This is the country that ended slavery and spent the equivalent in those terms to the entire amount we spent during the Second World War fighting Nazism on ending slavery. So we are the country that ended it, and that is the sort of thing that people ought to remember when they're looking at our history. But people, your viewers oughtn't to be under any illusion. I'm afraid this is common. This is a story that really hits the headlines, and rightly so. But this isn't by any means an aberration. We fought really hard when we were in government to stamp this stuff out.
Well, no, you say that. You say that. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Because it would have been really easy to just say, no, this stuff stops, full stop, doesn't happen during working hours. But the public sector unions and the permanent secretaries, they're fully signed up to this madness. You didn't do anything about it at all.
So I don't agree with that we didn't do anything about it, but you do put your finger on an important point, which is that where the control lies. And there's a big issue here about who governs this country. And more and more, lots of the questions we talk about on this programme and ones like it are where the power has slipped away from those who are elected to those who are not. This is just one example, but there's all sorts of others. We get it in migration. We get it in lots of what's called the woke agenda. And that is one of the biggest issues that we face, but people often don't understand because it's slightly academic, isn't it, when you're talking about it. I mean, unfortunately, one of the things you have to accept that when you're a government minister is that it isn't just a matter of you say something and it happens. You have to. There's a whole network of worlds and organisations that you have to work your way around. So
but that's the problem. That we are public servants are no longer public servants.
So you can do it. If
no, but you shouldn't have to work around. They're activists.
Oh, sorry.
There shouldn't be. Your job when you are public. Okay, if your job is to advise and give advice to ministers, that's absolutely fine, and do the numbers on it. But fundamentally, when given an instruction by a publicly elected minister, and I get it doesn't matter whether I voted for them or not. If they're democratically elected, your job is to do it, or you can resign.
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely right, and that is the understanding that it has to be. And too often, you find that you have a resistance from people who see themselves as holding you to account.
Yeah.
And you're not held to account by a system; you're held to account by the ballot box.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good to talk to you. Always great to get you on. Robert Courts, Casey, former MP, former government minister as well. Thank you for joining us. Benjamin Butterworth. I mean, can we come back to that issue? And again, it's not the biggest issue at all, but it is kind of part of the problem. When it ties in migration, ties in all the the lack of growth in this country and all the things that go on. We've got a public sector that is massively bloated and costing a fortune. We've got a government that's totally unwilling to make the cost cuts that they need to make for us to actually not have tax rises in the autumn to that £50 billion black hole. And we've got a political and media class, an elite class, academia and everybody who just kind of have contempt for ordinary British people and their concerns about things like migration, and contempt for our country's culture, values, history, and everything else. And hence why you get a load of public servants sitting there on a Zoom call on a Wednesday, spending an hour doing this nonsense rather than doing their job and serving the public, which is what their job is, literally to serve the public. I think this kind of weirdly epitomises everything that is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, look, whoever approved the guilt of being British hour-long seminar, I think should be hauled before HR themselves. I think it's that serious. It's absolutely obscene use of time.
That would probably be racist, probably transphobic.
And it's probably HR that organised it in the first place.
Of course it was.
But do you know, I think we have a problem that we don't have a national identity and we don't feel like we're working together as a team, as a country, and therefore you get all these kind of splintering attitudes, and there's sort of a lack of national mission in this country. I think to some extent the age we live in, the sort of algorithm politics where everyone lives in their silos and consumes different medias and different outlooks and no one ever talks or listens to each other, goes some way to explaining how it feels as though we live in different worlds, because it's never been easier to live in different worlds in the same country.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, people often say we, like, no, vast majority of the British country actually very, very proud of our country. It's just these other people who are in charge who aren't, which is what's so bizarre. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all that. 0344 499 1000. I can see a lot of calls coming in about my interview with Bonnie Blue. We'll get to some of those up next, but have your say on any of the big topics we are talking about. Right now, we'll take a quick break, but the number to call is 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Coming up to 12:27. Let's get to your phone calls right now. 0344 499 1000. A lot of you want to have your say about that interview I did with Bonnie Blue, aka, well, her real name is Tia Billinger, porn star. Sarah is in Somerset and wants to have her say. Good afternoon to you, Sarah.
Hi, Julia.
Hello.
Hi, I have a 12-year-old boy, and I had to turn the radio off.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Well, it's really sad that we're living in an age where, young minds, but not just young minds, there's so many women, as we know, that at the moment are literally, under threat by, migrants that are coming in that think it's okay to, but let's not go there.
There are plenty of men over Britain who think that too, by the way. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And as a parent, I find it really frightening that our society seems to have completely lost its sort of moral compass.
I agree with you.
And the idea of romance, the idea of engagement, the idea of, getting to know someone and actually, seeing it as a sacred act, which our ancestors understood to some extent because, marriage was always there. And it would be, an important part of our life and culture that people saw that, you contribute to your society, you look after each other. There's no looking after anyone in some sort of like demented, sadistic, perverted thing like that. It's grooming young minds.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to Tia Billinger, because I do think it's not just a sort of, it's all consenting adults, everything's fine, and she's enjoying it, everyone else is enjoying it, what's the problem? I think we genuinely do have a massive issue with the pornification of society, and I'm as worried about your 12-year-old son as I would be if I had still had a 12-year-old daughter, in terms of what they see and what they are being told is normal, because it's not just like, okay, they might not know who she is or watch any of her stuff, but their friends will, and their boyfriends or girlfriends will, and they will be expecting that this is what they do. And I think we are in horrible, scary, dangerous territory, and people who don't get that have just got their heads in the sand.
Yeah, they have, and it is dangerous. And so many children now, are confused about their sexuality. Yeah. I mean, when we were at school and nursery, it was never even an issue.
Of course it wasn't. We're confused about their gender identity. I mean,
It's like, children now are self-harming. Children now have all sorts of like mental health issues that didn't even exist when we were younger. And I just think it's really scary and really sad. And that woman is utterly selfish.
You think she's selfish?
Utterly, because she cannot see the damage that she's doing to the girl. And also, I actually heard her being interviewed by Andrew Gold on Heretic. She's brilliant. And she said, I don't give a damn about other women. I don't give a damn.
She's very scathing about other women, isn't she? As I said, my strongest sensation I felt when I watched the Channel 4 documentary was I just feel sad. I'm not jealous. The view will be obviously, you're old, you're fat, you're not as rich. I mean, she wasn't talking like that, and certainly was very, very lovely when we were off air. But actually, that view that anyone who's critical of it is jealous. I genuinely feel sorry. I feel sorry that that's how she makes someone. I don't think those millions would actually make anyone happy. But Sarah, I mean, you and I are exactly on the same page. When your son's not in the room, do go to the YouTube page and have a listen. I think you'll be really interested in what she had to say and the questions I put to her. Thank you for your call. Appreciate that. Let's go to Linda, who is in East Anglia. Linda, what do you want to say?
Oh, hello, Julia. I'm pretty much on the same page as Sarah from Somerset as well, to be fair. I just despair, really, listening and not really sure. She clearly believes what she's saying.
I think she does believe it, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think she does.
Well, it's like those women who say, they've got a guy who beats them and it says, but he loves me.
Yeah.
It's kind of that territory for me.
Indeed. And I work in an area where I work with women that in some cases have been either abused or have had accidents to their private parts. It does happen, and the language she was using, it just made my skin crawl.
Yeah, that's the thing that I most picked up, is that, like, destroy me, hurt me, and things like I rearrange my senses. A lot of these phrases I was so sort of physically repulsed by when I heard her say it in an interview and watching the Channel 4 documentary as well. And that any young woman or anybody would talk about themselves in that way.
Oh, indeed. I think she knows that she's going to be safe because she's got security. She has got, like the previous caller was saying, she's got, lost my thread, sorry. But yeah, so she's got safety.
I mean, she's got millions. She can afford security. She can isolate herself, can't she?
Exactly. She's got absolutely no thought for anybody else other than her. She is completely selfish. And she clearly is lazy, where she's saying that all the other women that haven't come to protest her, we haven't got a work ethic. Well, what's her work ethic? Lying on her back for a day and then going on holiday for several weeks or whatever she does. I mean, if she really had a work ethic, she'd build up some sort of business.
Well, she has got a business and she has millions in the bank.
Yeah, well...
She works, no, she does have you made it clear, she does work every day. And again, it seems to me to be quite relentless, but my big worry, of course, is, you do an extreme act to get notoriety, well, then you have to do the next extreme act, and the next woman does the next extreme act, and where does it end? Where does it end? That's my big worry. So appreciate those calls. Thank you, Linda, and also Sarah before her. Thank you for that. It's interesting, the male caller earlier said, I watched the documentary The Way to Work, and I support her, and to women feeling different. Again, I wonder if it's like, women of a certain age, and we're like, are we just being all sort of, are we the Mary Whitehouses of our generation, Benjamin Butterworth?
I think you cannot be Mary Whitehouse and draw the line before sleeping with a man every 40 seconds.
Can we
for a
not
whole
use
day?
phrase sleeping with?
Well,
I hate it when people say that. It's not. There's no woman sleeping.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Some of the men wearing balaclavas may have had their eyes closed. I don't know. But you know what I mean? The whole thing was so repulsive to me.
Yeah.
And I say I'm fairly liberal on a lot of these things, but I gave my overwhelming feeling is a sense of sadness, but also trepidation for young women and young men now.
But the thing is, I think Linda there was making a really good point, which is that she has all the enormous glamorous benefits of this, but there will be many replicas out there who will not make much money, will actually be incredibly vulnerable. There'll be men, young men going into relationships with women, having these expectations and distortions, and I think that's what's concerning. But in another way, I almost think that somehow Bonnie Blue is the least interesting person to speak to in a sense, because actually it's society at whole.
Oh yeah, she's a symptom.
Exactly.
She's not the problem. She's a symptom of the problem. But I think it's useful to at least get her version of events. Look, there's so much more I want to talk about. Plenty more calls as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to have yours say. Going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about what's going to happen with our taxes, particularly our council tax. We're going to talk to the Institute of Economic Affairs' Matthew Lesh about that up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benjamin Butler's still with me as well. Let's get some breaking news for you. Vladimir Zelensky has said he's not afraid to meet with Vladimir Putin, following reports of a possible trilateral meeting alongside Donald Trump. He says Ukraine is not afraid of meetings and expects the same brave approach from the Russian side. It's time we ended the war. I don't know whether Vladimir Zelensky's, his persuasive manner will be enough for Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. But it's very interesting. The former Defence Secretary here, Sir Ben Wallace, has said that Britain must also be invited to attend any peace talks alongside Vladimir Zelensky to avoid him being bullied by Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. He said the Ukrainian president is a brave man, but he needs support to push back against Trump and the Russian president, who are known to be bullies. And after what we saw in the White House with J.D. Vance and the US president, I thought Zelensky held his own very well, Benjamin Butler. That would be understandable, wouldn't it?
I think it certainly would be in Zelensky's interests, because there's something odd about Trump, that he seems to kowtow to Putin.
I wonder
and
why.
The Russian propaganda when it comes to the crunch. He said lots of things criticising Russia in recent weeks. It seemed like his tone has changed, but I would not be confident if I were alone with those two men and Zelensky.
No, absolutely. Very much agree with you on that. Let's talk right now about taxes and what's going to happen to them. Matthew Lesh is a public policy fellow at the Institute of Economic Affairs, the free market think tank. Very good afternoon to you, Matthew.
Good afternoon.
Thanks so much for joining us. Lots of tax stories in the news today. One, of course, in the wake of that 51 billion, who knows how much it is today, apparently a black hole in the public finances that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, faces after a think tank sort of put the numbers together. Some of that is a lack of growth, some of that's the rise in interest, some of that is, costed in, welfare costs and the like. But basically, she's got to fill that public black hole. How are we going to fill it? Well, the Prime Minister yesterday, Keir Starmer, after that news emerged, was asked about whether he stands by his manifesto pledges about not putting taxes up, the crucial tax rates up for people, working families. And he kind of seemed to not reiterate. It was very, very simple. No, of course we stand by our pledge. We will not put the rates of income tax, national insurance or VAT up. And he didn't do that. Is that telling? Should we expect some of those to go up at the autumn budget?
Look, here we are, the £50 billion question. At the moment, what the government's done is very much failed in what it was trying to do a year ago, which is it's both failed in achieving economic growth, but it's also failed with respect to keeping government spending under control. And you've seen the backlashes on the Labour backbenchers that have forced them to have these policy reversals that have now created this quite problematic fiscal situation for the government.
Well, it's quite a problematic fiscal situation for the taxpayer as well.
Well, indeed. And we already knew, of course, taxes were going up. Now they're going to have to go up even more. They were going up because they have the intention to keep thresholds frozen when it comes to income tax. That's not going to be enough to cover this. There are other levers that they can try to pull. So you hear a lot about, let's say, putting up taxes on pensions. But those are quite tricky. They discourage people from saving. They don't necessarily raise as much revenue. So some people are now turning around and these economics organisations saying, well, what you need to do instead is put up those three main taxes the government is committed to not putting up. Now, look, I don't know what the government's going to land on this. I think it would be quite politically toxic. And I can say that because putting on the other hat I wear at Fresh West Strategy, we've been doing some polling recently asking people about whether or not they do want to see higher taxes in order to fund public services or whether they want lower taxes and they're willing to see some cuts to public services. And we've seen a real reversal, perhaps 5-10 years ago, in that kind of what was considered the Tory austerity era. The sense was, okay, well, maybe we should pay a bit more tax. That's not the sense today at all. You do get very big majorities, 60% of people or so will say, in fact, we want to see taxes go down, we want to see the government cut spending.
But also, even when the people say they do want taxes to go up, I remember it's extraordinary fact to discover that when Tony Blair put up, let's put a penny on national insurance to pay for the NHS, and it was a massively popular policy, and he got elected on it. People say, you see, people will vote for it. Turns out in the focus groups, people thought they genuinely were paying each a penny more, not actually as a percentage of all of their income. They really did not realise they'd had a big tax hike. And again, a lot of people don't pay that much attention to pay back until, of course, they go, hold on a minute, there's nothing left of it after the tax man's been there. But the reality is most people will say, oh, yes, you can put taxes up on those people over there, the wealthy, the big corporations. And they don't realise, A, there aren't enough wealthy people, and the ones who are very wealthy are going to be taxed more. They're already paying 30% of the taxes in this country. They will leave. We know they'll do that because that's what's happened in every country where they've done that, and it's already happening here. But also these big corporations, these big companies, most of them aren't big companies, and most people work for companies that aren't multinational corporations like Google or high street favourites who've got loads of money. And actually, a lot of those companies will end up going under, and actually that hurts working people. We're going to end up paying those extra taxes somehow.
Well, indeed, there isn't simply more revenue to get out of taxing top earners. At the moment, we already very much squeeze them. We have and this is something the Tories never really celebrated very much, but they created an extremely progressive tax system where the top 1% of earners are paying something like 40% of all tax, the top 10% about 60%. You tax those people more, you do discourage work, and you end up with a weaker economy. The only way to raise major pieces of revenue, and this is again why the government's ruling out, why they're having issues with ruling out these kind of tax rises, is to start taxing middle income earners. And I think you are right. In the past, people have seen, well, if we put up taxes, that's going to be somebody else paying. If you're on £50,000, it'll be someone on £60,000. If you're on £100,000, it'll be someone on £120,000 who's rich, and they're going to pay the taxes. The reality people are now discovering, as they are paying higher taxes, is that no, it's people who are working who are getting stung with these.
Yeah, and we are getting stung with. I mean, working families are paying more tax. Families people who are on really average earnings now, or only slightly above average earnings, their top part of their income is being dragged into the higher rate of tax. So going up from 20% to 40%. They go, I've worked hard, I've got a promotion, I've got a pay rise. No, 40% of that plus national insurance is going to the tax man. People start noticing that. That used to be a tax rate. It was, it's a higher rate. It's not the highest anymore, 45%. But it used to be a rate that, the bank manager would pay, not a teacher or a nurse or a police officer. And that's the big difference. Plus, not just the tax thresholds more and more being people dragged into it, but of course, we've got tax on energy, tax on petrol, fuel duty, and everything, and VAT. We pay more tax in VAT. The rate hasn't gone up, but when prices go up on everything, we do pay more tax.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And then you get these kind of woo ideas about wealth taxes and about trying to find other ways to tax people because they don't want to start taxing people's incomes. And then we all know that those the kind of things that will scare away wealth creators and investors and will shrink our economy. And again, this is where the government's really struggled here, of course, because they came in saying, oh, we're just going to put up taxes here and there. It's only the wealthy that will pay. And now you've seen abolishing the non-dom rules means perhaps some wealthy people will leave the country and they're going to take their wealth and their investment with them elsewhere. You put up taxes on national insurance. It's actually been a massive issue. This is where the Bank of England is actually part of the reason why they're struggling today, is because you've seen a reduction in employment starting to come through, which is why we've seen this rate cut. We've seen it kind of this weakening economy combined with talk about high minimum wage. You try to do all these other things because you don't want to put up taxes on income, and it will also have other consequences.
And it's interesting, the Bank of England just had a press conference about their decision announced at 12 p.m. Obviously, of course, they're taking interest rates down to 4%. But they're now predicting the inflation forecast that it will peak at 4%. Now, again, that's, it's 2% is the target the Bank of England is supposed to have in terms of inflation. Okay, 4% isn't 11%, which we did have a couple of years ago. But again, we're going to have that 4% inflation on top of the last few years and the 11% we have. They haven't come down in the meantime. They're carrying on going up and people can feel it. Here's the other thing. Council tax is in the news as well. Lots of people have seen their council tax go up. That's a really big sort of lump sum that people see, they notice. They get that letter through the council and they'll do it at the same time as they know, I used to have weekly bin collections. Now it's every 3 weeks for some of my bins or every 2 weeks. There used to be a good leisure centre. That's been closed down. I used to get this or that. That's been closed down. The streets are dirty. The street lighting doesn't work. People can really feel that we're not getting a lot of the public services people feel they pay their council tax for. But now we're talking about council tax payments going up, particularly in people in wealthy areas, or though they may not necessarily be the wealthy people themselves, to pay for people in more deprived areas. Can you very quickly explain how that would work?
So the government's reconsidering how it distributes central government money to councils, and part of what they're doing, I suppose, is reasonable sense, which is they're doing this kind of needs-based assessment. There might be some areas in the Midlands or in the north in England that are a bit more needy than those in London and the South East. What they're also doing, though, which I think is quite interesting, is they're effectively punishing councils that have managed to keep their council rates low. So there's several councils in London, Wandsworth famously being Thatcher's favourite, but ones like Westminster or Camden, where they have successfully managed to keep costs relatively on the downside, and they haven't had to put up council rates as much. Now, under the new formula that the government's considering, they're going to effectively take that into account and say, well, you can put up your council rates for your residents, and instead we're going to use some central government money. And that could lead in some of the wealthier parts, considered to be wealthier parts of the country, councils facing up to 10 to 12% of funding cuts. You're seeing 186 councils, according to this analysis, losing a total of 2.1 billion in grants. So this is kind of a very Labour redistributive effort that basically seen areas that have been successful and saying, well, you don't deserve as much. Let's give it to different parts of the country.
I'm not sure people are going to be very pleased about that, but there we are. Given actually a huge amount of money already paid in tax, which is progressive, goes already to councils. A lot of people, who've again worked hard, done well, perhaps had to save up for a huge mortgage in some parts of the country, particularly in London, are going to be even more fed up about that. Great to talk to you, Matthew. Thank you so much for going through some of that with us from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Benjamin Butterworth, we know you're somebody, one of these young people spending a long time trying to get on the housing ladder and all of that issue. We're going to be talking about rents in just a couple of moments as well. But council tax, all these taxes, it does eat into the money that people earn.
Yeah, I mean, there's an oddity here because actually home ownership is much higher in a place like Hartlepool than it is a place like Camden if you're under 40, because the cost of the housing to your income is far more relative. And so the idea of what makes you wealthy is really not as linear as it once was.
Yeah, someone's got £1 million home. It's like it's a 3-bedroom tiny little house with a half a garden.
Yeah, back when I was renting a £1.2 million house, and people were like, wow. And I'm like, yeah, but that's just because it's not big, trust me. It's just because it's London.
Yeah.
And so, but what I would say is that the bit that no one mentions is demographics.
Yeah.
When you're looking at public spending, the triple lock, this thing that gives pensions keep rising, is going to add £31 billion in the next 12 months. So at some point, if we're getting serious about all the public money going out, I'm sorry, but some of those people in very nice houses that are 70 and on their pension, I think they should actually not get so much public money.
Well, there we are. They'll say, well, I've paid into my pension. There we are.
Not that much.
I'm sure another day we'll have time for more calls on that. Benjamin Butterworth, thank you. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking about Labour's homelessness minister, I kid you not, evicting tenants from the house that she rents to them so she could put the rent up by £700, even though she has fought all her political life against private renters being exploited. That's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. And again, if you did miss my interview with Tia Billinger, you'll know her better probably as Bonnie Blue, or like one of our callers earlier who just found out about her. Do have a look at my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. I know a lot of people think, oh, it's a titillating bit of publicity for a porn star. No, I don't. I think anyone who actually listened or watched would know that's exactly what it was not. I'm also not going to sit and berate a young guest in my studio either. But I thought it was a really interesting conversation. I really, really implore you to have a look. And I think, especially if you're a parent, you've got kids, particularly if you've got young teenagers, really think you need to know more about this topic because, trust me, your kids already do. Maybe it's a good idea that you do too and have a conversation with them about it. There you go. That's what I thought. Mary Whitehouse in the studio for you today. Anyway, 12:51, almost come to 12:52 is the time. Let's talk about homelessness, people getting evicted from their homes. Now, there's a difference between someone who's surfing on a sofa, people who are sleeping on the streets, or people who just get evicted because they can no longer afford their rent, or their landlord decides that actually they no longer want them there because they want to rent out to someone else, possibly on a higher rent. Well, one of the people you might have thought wouldn't do that is Rushanara Ali. She's a government minister. Indeed, she's the Labour Party's homelessness minister. She's been known in her political life for her fight against private renters being exploited, those are her words, and championing reform against what she calls unreasonable rent increases for those who are stuck in the rental market. And yet it's now emerged that she evicted 4 tenants from one of the 2 houses that she rents out herself to make money, and then immediately after they were ousted, upping the monthly rent by £700. Yes, really. Well, let's talk about this right now with James Hummerston-Pope. He's a housing expert and an estate agent. A very good afternoon to you.
Hi, how are you?
Thanks for joining us. I'm very well, thanks. I mean, this is just classic hypocrisy from a politician, particularly a Labour politician, bleating away about how terrible life is for renters because they're being exploited by these evil landlords, and then being a landlord, you know, giving them, I think they got 4 months' notice. They weren't like turfed out overnight, but given 4 months' notice because basically she wanted to put the rent up.
I mean, you can't write it, and that's what makes me smile with these things because, you know, you've got someone there who's advocating, you know, pushing for renters' rights, talking about equality and being fair, but on the flip side is doing something, quite frankly, totally against what she preaches about. It's comical.
Well, we've even had some people, some Labour MPs, I think, who've been sort of slammed as being slum landlords for some of the state of the properties that they've been looking after, they've been owning. Look, there's a lot of money in renting out, and the governments over the years have tried to take a lot of that profit out of it. And a lot of people will say, they don't want people to be making money from renting out properties. People should, be able to afford to buy them. The reality is a lot of people aren't in a position to buy anything. They're not settled down somewhere. We need a rental market. But what rights do renters currently have? Because there is a difference, isn't there, between someone in their 20s wanting perhaps a 6-month lease, they don't know where they're going to be working, and someone who, and this is often now the case, people in their 30s or 40s, 50s who've got family, got kids at a local school, who do want to have a longer lease and want to have some sort of security.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the moment there are a range of options for tenants and landlords that are currently on the market, and you have got those tenancies that are 6 months, and then they roll into periodic tenancies after that, which just means that it's month in, month out rolling. Both sides can give notice at any point. But there are the options whereby some people can, with the agreement on both sides, tie in for much longer periods of time. My other half currently rents a property. Their tenant is currently signed into a contract for 3 years. They know they've got security for that 3-year period, and they've already, openly expressed the fact that they want to stay. So there are options as long as that communication is open and upfront right at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, some people, again, they don't want the long list. Some people do. But then there's also the issue of landlords' rights, isn't there? I mean, seems to me, you own the property, you've got a contract with somebody, you've got the right under the law, what as exists, to give notice and say, well, actually, my kids left university, I want to let them live in that flat. Or, my mortgage has gone up. I mean, most people who rent out properties aren't big corporations making a fortune. It's one person who's bought a property as an investment for their retirement income, and they rent that one property out. But they've often got a mortgage. Their mortgage has gone up. They need to get more income. They say, well, I'm going to have to put the rent up. and if you can't afford it, I have to evict you. I mean, at the end of the day, people who rent out properties, who own, they should have the right to decide who live in them, shouldn't they?
Absolutely, they should have that right. You know, also, as you've mentioned there, a lot of landlords are what we would call accidental landlords. They never went into the rental sector to be landlords. They had a property they couldn't sell. They were in a fortunate position to rent it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. They need to cover their costs. Not all landlords, as you've mentioned, are big corporations that can swallow the increases on mortgage payments. We've seen mortgage payments shoot through the roof for most families across the UK. Those landlords need to be able to cover that. So if rent needs to increase, they need to be able to claw back that cost.
And people have a right to charge the local market rent. I mean, we don't require, Sainsbury's to sell milk at a certain low price, even though every other supermarket has. But here's the thing: this all comes down to, it's been the mantra of my show for many more years: build more houses. If you wouldn't have such a waiting list for the council properties. If people could afford private rents, then you wouldn't have so many people who can't afford private rents you couldn't afford to buy. If people didn't have such high prices, we do not have enough supply of housing that people want and can live in compared to the demand. It's that simple.
It is. It's as simple as that, black and white. We do not have enough housing stock across the UK. And a shocking stat that people will not know until today, or a lot of people won't know until today, is that in the private rented sector, currently in 2025, the vast majority, the average rent on take-home salary that's paid out is 41%. So 41% of your take-home salary is currently being paid on rent.
Yeah, and you've got nothing to show for it. You might have a big mortgage, but at least they've got a property to show for it at the end of it. They've got nothing to show for it. No, it's an absolute disaster. And again, people wonder why they haven't got money to go and spend in other areas of the economy. It's a disaster on every single front, our housing policy. It really is. James Humberston Pope, so appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much, Steve, for that. Benjamin Butterworth, I mean, look, you're one of the people who were dealing with that for many years.
Yes, and I'd just point out, you compared it to, we don't set prices for supermarkets, but if we had the same approach to food sales as we do to housing, we'd be living in a famine, and a pint of milk would cost £5, right? Because we have so many rules to stop building anything that's how we
even where people desperately cry out for homes. And what annoys me is when people say, "Oh, I don't want my house price to go down," but I can't understand why my kid can't buy a house in the local area. Pick a side, guys. Anyway, a big thanks to Benjamin Butterworth. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so sorry I didn't get to all your calls coming in on the migrants, but also quite a lot on Bonnie Blue. Wanted to have you say, Ian Collins is here right now to tell us what's on his show.
Yeah, I missed the Bonnie Blue interview, but I'll be watching it tonight at 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12.
This is it. It's not what you... This is why I wanted to do this. Our social media lot will be all upset because it wasn't all titillating.
No, but as it turns... It wasn't all titillating, but as it turns out, me and Bonnie went down in the lift together after your interview. So we were... Why is that weird? What's strange about that? We just happened to be in the same lift.
He's going to get what for when he...
It was like Tesco, custom number 2, please. It was a very odd experience being stuffed in a lift with Bonnie Blue.
I know there were a lot of people asking for selfies with the boys and girls, interestingly. I did not. I don't know.